All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to House Economic Matters. Today is Friday, February 21st. We have 11 bills and 60 oral witnesses. So we will start. The first one is the administration, House Bill 505, the Energize Act. And then, Safe, are you coming up? Yep. And if you have a panel, bring up your panel. Okay. You can start when ready. Carol, good to see you.
Hi.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair presiding as chair, the members of the ECM Committee. First of all, I wanted to actually wish happy birthday to the chair and Delegate Rogers. Thank you for being here, but it seems like Mr. Chair is still enjoying his birthday. Thank you for the opportunity to offer our testimony on HB 505, the Energize Maryland Act. On behalf of the governor, I want to first acknowledge the work that the Speaker, the Senate President, their teams, member of General Assembly are doing this session to continue to prioritize the needs and the challenges of Marylanders and the commitment to make Maryland more energy independent. For the record, my name is Saif Ratul. I serve as the governor's deputy legislative officer. I'm joined here today with Dr. Ryan Opsal from MEA. He's the policy director. Ryan Marshall from the Iron Workers. Carol Lane from X Energy. Evan Vaughn from Merrick Action. Rebecca Rear from Maryland LCV, and a few other folks. So Maryland is at a critical point when it comes down to energy policy. From resource adequacy to reliability and affordability, and the continued demand growth without building more in-state generations created a perfect storm of challenges. The administration's proposal as a part of larger energy policies and the packages that this body will discuss aims to boost in-state clean energy generation to strengthen reliability, lower cost, and support economic growth while tackling the larger supply-demand issues. This legislation builds on Clean Energy Jobs Act passed by this body in 2019. This body knows the importance of nuclear energy in Maryland. Calvert Cliffs nuclear power plant generates about 40% of Maryland's in-state electricity. That is zero-emission, clean baseload energy, and yet the state has never officially recognized nuclear as a clean energy source. So our proposal changes that by formally classifying nuclear as a clean energy. It also sets up a procurement mechanism similar to the one used for offshore wind to encourage the development of new nuclear energy projects right here in Maryland. The legislation also modifies Maryland's solar and offshore wind provisions. Right now, Maryland's Solar Alternative Compliance Payment, otherwise known as the ACP, is set to decrease, which could slow down new solar development in the state. This proposed legislation would freeze the ACP at its current 2024 rate of 6 cents per kilowatt hour, creating a more stable market and giving investors the confidence needed to drive more solar growth in the state. When Maryland first established its offshore wind provisions, it was a groundbreaking move, riding the winds of change in developing more offshore wind while ensuring the protections for ratepayer was paramount. Legislatures had the foresight to set a public rate cap, making their intent extremely clear. However, this also allowed developers to bid right up to the maximum limit. So to drive a more competitive bidding process and prevent developers from pushing the prices as high as possible at the extent of ratepayer, this legislation gives the Public Service Commission the authority to set a confidential reference pricing. This means if a developer submits an overpriced bid to maximize their profit, PSC can reject it and require a rebid. New Jersey most recently used a similar approach leading a projected savings for ratepayers as well. The administration today is offering a number of amendments to further protect the ratepayer while ensuring these investments are focused on more in-state generation. So the First Amendment will apply the ACP freeze prospectively for only new solar projects in the state. We are also offering an amendment for a comprehensive report on the return of the state solar development and investment and the steps for the state to take to reach 100% clean electricity goals. And the third amendment are some technical changes to the Clean Energy Business Fund. So I know there will be a number of other amendments that various groups and individuals will share, and we look forward to working with this committee and the stakeholders to address those. Now I'll pass it on to Ryan from Ironworker.
Thank you, Saif. And thank you to the members of the committee for having me here today.
Hey, sir, real quick, because I already see, it's not your fault. You guys got to really speak into the microphones. They don't pick up anything. Thank you.
Sure thing. My name is Ryan Marshall. I'm a union organizer at Ironworkers Local 5 based in Prince George's County, Maryland, and I'm here today in favor of the Energize Maryland Act. I joined Ironworkers Local 5 in 2016 in the apprenticeship program, working on several projects such as the MGM Casino and Hotel, the Wharf DC, and many other notable projects. By 2019, I had graduated from the registered apprenticeship program, becoming a journey person, allowing me to make a family-sustaining wage to support my wife and now 2 sons. This Energize Act will speed up the process for new projects in the energy industry that will allow more young people like myself into the construction industry to support their families. For instance, my local union had built Calvert Cliffs in the 1970s, and we continue to maintain that regularly today. Our registered apprenticeship program has been Global Wind Organization certified, and we have been an accredited facility with them since 2023. We have been training our members as well as other instructors in this industry right here in Maryland. Simply put, this legislation strengthens Maryland's workforce, creating thousands of jobs and union apprenticeship programs right here in the state of Maryland. I thank you all for your time, and I look forward to a favorable report on this bill.
Vice Chair Crosby and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Carol Lane, Vice President of Government Relations for X-Energy, a Maryland-based advanced nuclear reactor company headquartered in Rockville. Founded in 2009, we employ about 450 people and expect to grow to 750 to 800 by year's end. As a leading small modular reactor developer, our technology offers some key advantages. Our fuel, which you see here, is the core of our safety case and can't melt down. The Department of Energy has called it the most robust fuel on Earth. Our reactors use no water. In our reactor core, we use inert helium gas. Our safety case results in a compact emergency planning zone, allowing siting near industrial hubs and data centers. And our reactor produces both electricity and steam for industrial and heat applications. SMRs are approaching deployment in the early 2030s. Our high-temperature gas-cooled reactor will be built, the first one will be built in Seadrift, Texas with Dow Chemical at a facility down there in partnership with the Department of Energy's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. This past October, we signed a partnership with Amazon to develop over 5 gigawatts of power from our reactors out through 2039. While federal support has been crucial for the first-of-a-kind risks, state-level policies are now essential to accelerate the deployment. This bill recognizes nuclear energy's role that it currently plays in generating about 40% of Maryland's electricity and 82% of clean energy, creates a nuclear procurement process that encourages the Maryland PSC to consider new nuclear generation. And it does, as mentioned, it does update the renewable energy portfolio to include clean energy, to be a clean energy portfolio, allowing SMRs and renewables to complement each other. We're committed to helping the state grow its clean energy, and thank you. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Hey, I'm Ryan Opsel, Director of Policy at the Maryland Energy Administration, and I'm here to answer questions. Thank you.
Delegate Charkoudian.
Mr. Chair. Thanks for your work on this. I want to ask about two things. First, on offshore wind, you talked about changing the procurement. I'm not sure if you mentioned, but I wanted to ask about the change in the transmission. So as I understand it right now, our rules are that Maryland ratepayers will pay for offshore wind, which, as you know, I'm 150% behind, that it's really crucial for our future on the East Coast. But right now, we pay for it only when it's essentially going to be injecting into Maryland's grid, essentially, the Delmarva Peninsula, and only when we're sure it's going to be Maryland jobs, iron worker, IBEW, et cetera. And as I read this, it looks like the removal of that requirement means that we would have Maryland ratepayers paying for offshore wind that could be interconnected in New Jersey, interconnected in North Carolina, as far south as North Carolina. And I think one of the things that many of us have been talking about is really directing our RPS to be more about building in Maryland. And this feels like it moves in the opposite direction. So we don't have the job benefit here, and we don't have the load. It's not serving Maryland load as directly. So while I appreciate that it allows us to, check a box and say we're getting credit for 8.5 gigawatts, and that's going to be a lot harder right now. We expect it to be harder to get to 8.5 gigawatts in the next couple of years. But I think that some of the fundamental things that we're trying to do with energy in the state of like serving Maryland load and getting good Maryland jobs in manufacturing and so on sort of get lost in that. So I just wanted to know if you wanted to speak to that issue.
Sure. Thank you so much for that question, Delegate. And I understand where you're coming from. The interconnection issues for offshore wind remains to be one of the most challenging aspect of this industry here in Maryland, given our challenging landscape. Our goal here for this legislation is to provide that level of flexibility while uplifting those investments this project has to and must make in Maryland, right? So for any approved project, for this project to receive OREX from PSC, they will need to pursue a net benefit requirement for the state that looks into a number of different criteria, that looks into job growth criteria, that looks into in-state workforce development, supply chain, community benefit agreement, and minority business enterprises agreement, and investment, and a number of other those. So while while we're removing that requirement, all of those projects that are supposed to receive those OREX from PSC, they will have to pass that net benefit requirement from the state in order to receive their OREX.
Yeah, Delegate, I do believe, we are aligned in these objectives, right, to try and drive more of a benefit to Maryland. As Mr. Ratul just mentioned, this does not, bypass the CPCM process, which is the actual mechanism where, in-state investments to, say, steel manufacturing are made as a condition of receiving those OREX or other facilities, cable facilities, any of those core investments. Those are the conditions that are really responsible for driving a lot of the in-state investment in the industry that we are trying to get. Now, why are we trying to relax this requirement? I mean, frankly, one reason is just simple issues of geography, trying to find places to actually have these interconnection. I know that you are, very well familiar with this situation, but I think one of the other issues too that we are looking at is cost as well. I mean, the ability to have a project be able to site in a location that maybe makes more sense can hopefully, and is certainly part of the intent of what we're trying to do to drive down that cost. If it's going to cost too much to interconnect somewhere on the Delmarva Peninsula, I think it makes sense to, at the very least, be looking at the ability or the potential to allow a developer to site outside of that area if it makes sense for costs.
Okay. hope we can keep working together on thinking about transmission solutions. I do worry that we really need to drive anything that we are subsidizing to meet Maryland load. That sort of is a continual criticism of our RPS, is that our tier 1 RECs go to Illinois. And I think that this sort of exacerbates that at a time when there's other legislation that we're considering that sort of is kind of the opposite, is really trying to drive more and more RECs, more and more of anything that we're subsidizing to make sure we're meeting Maryland load. The second question I wanted to ask about was the ACPs and the solar plan. So I am pleased to hear that you have an amendment for that, because of course one of the concerns about freezing ACPs is that you give money to projects that don't need the money anymore. But I think on the solar stuff, one of the other concerns, and we've seen this, is that we really potentially need a more nuanced approach. That it's, you know, the RPS as we had it was sort of worked as when we got started, but the reality of the solar industry is that different parts of the industry have different advantages and disadvantages. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk of we want more rooftop, but rooftop is more expensive, or we want more brownfield, but brownfield is more expensive, and utility scale, and these are the advantages and these are the disadvantages. And so I think continually what we've found with a bunch of different adjustments to the proposals in front of the legislature is that having one ACP for all solar projects both doesn't respond to the nuances of the market to make sure that we're developing in all areas, and also that it doesn't, by locking it in, should we find ourselves 5 years from now not needing, you know, solar projects not needing that high of a subsidy, we don't have the sort of mechanism besides coming back here to lower that subsidy, right? And so really, you know, as you know, I'm promoting a more flexible approach of having the PSC be able to respond more quickly, really to maximize the ability, like to make the best use of ratepayer money and make sure we're not collecting a cent more from ratepayers than we absolutely have to get solar built. And so my concern about it is that it's just a very blunt instrument and it doesn't respond to the nuances of where we are in the market right now. So I just wanted to say that and give you a chance to respond to that.
Thank you, Delegate. And, you know, I totally hear your concern, and, you know, I look forward to working with you on addressing some of those concerns.
Yeah, I have a proposal if you're interested in it.
Of course. Now, here's the thing, and something that you mentioned, Delegate, was that, you know, coming back every year trying to fix this, right? And something, you know, we offered in our amendment is the state is making a lot of those investment in the solar. You know, from last year, this body passed the Brighter Tomorrow Act to incentivize more in-state solar, right? There's a number of those things, tweaks that we have been making, but we haven't really looked at a comprehensive approach to see if those tweaks are really spurring more investment. So one of this amendment will authorize MEA to look back, right? All of these provisions that we are doing in 2032, I believe, is the date where we are doing a comprehensive report coming back to this body again and say that we have made all of those investments, right, over the course. And some of those investments, the return of those, it takes a little bit of time for us to really address that. So going back, looking at those and coming up with where this is working, where these are not working, and come and work on those solutions as well. So we're looking forward to working with you on those.
Yeah, I think we do know, because we can look at what has been built and what hasn't been built. But thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
You see me? Sorry, I thought you said Pippi. My apologies. I think it's Carol, right? The SMRs, have you guys put any of those in place yet?
No, we're in the process of finishing.
Hey, Delegate Fisher, can you just ask that again, closer to the mic?
What is this? These...
Surprising nobody here.
The SMRs, have you put any of those in place?
No, we are finishing up our design. We have a site selected down in Texas.
Okay.
We will be submitting our application for construction with Dow in the next couple of months.
Okay.
So the early timeframe is the early 2030s.
Okay.
That's
early,
for all the
early 2030s.
Yes.
Okay. So I ask because obviously, you know, I'm sure everybody is a fan of SMRs, but the timeline for realistic deployment is not going to help the current crisis that we have. But we still need them, obviously. So I appreciate that. And then to the governor's staff, I was looking at Exhibit 1, and there was a redo, I guess, in this bill of the current law as it deals with the goals for clean energy. It says the current law, it's by 2025, 38%. That's the goal in terms of renewable energy or clean energy. I guess that's the new term that's used. Have we already met that current law goal?
So no, we have not. And the bulk of what we would have done would have been through simply REC purchases or, especially in the past years, ACP purchases. But I would point out that those adjustments were made, they were revised upward, and they were revised upward to also reflect Calvert Cliffs as a clean energy source. And I would point out too that we are not providing any, in this bill, we're not providing any ratepayer funds for existing generation, existing nuclear generation.
So to clarify, because I'm not certain, the current law is 38% of clean energy in 2025, and we have not met that target. Is that correct?
It has been met, so it has not been met through in-state generation.
It's not been met in in-state generation.
Correct.
But if Calvert Cliffs were included, since they produce at least 40% of the state's electricity, given any given day, or any given day, it actually would be met.
It would go a long way. I would
Well, if it
point out.
produces 40% of the state's electricity, we would already met the standard in 2025.
So that's 40% of the state's generation profile. So the actual consumption that Calvert Cliffs would provide is roughly in the neighborhood of 25%. And so the RPS is structured based on the consumption profile of the state. So it would make up about 25% of that, yes.
But you're changing it in the bill to 60%, 60.5% in 2025. So why are you changing something in the bill for 2025 when we haven't even met the current standard? Why do something that's not achievable?
I think what we were trying to do was simply build on the existing RPS. So we basically left that unchanged and simply as an accounting mechanism wanted to add in Calvert Cliffs and make sure that the state reflects that we're counting that as clean energy.
So then would we meet the new standard for 2025?
We would meet the standard.
With this bill, if this bill were to pass?
We would, well, even if this bill did not pass, the RPS would still be in place, and we would still have to meet those levels of RPS requirements.
Would we meet it?
Not without REC purchases or ACP payments.
Okay, so why make it so aggressive then? Why not spread it out longer, especially given the current state of electricity prices and lack of generation and so forth?
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, we really just wanted to make it as simple as possible by reflecting our existing nuclear generation that we have in the state and simply building on the existing RPS that was passed.
Okay. And one last question for clarification. I did read the bill, I always do, but just want clarification as to how it treats wind now. How has that changed in the bill? Since we don't have offshore wind, how would this bill affect it?
So there are 3 separate provisions in there for offshore wind that would make modifications. One has to do with including basically a payment if a offshore wind developer says we're going to pull out of our ORECs like has happened previously here and in other states. They basically are then responsible for effectively making the state resources whole for reviewing those projects. Another one is an adjustment, as Delegate Charkoudian brought up, to relaxing the Delmarva interconnection requirement. And then the other one is to shift from a ratepayer impact cap that is specifically set in statute to one that is set internally, like an internal reference price by the PSC, and that is specifically designed because it is our view that if you have a public amount, that it is basically further incentive for a company to push up those prices, where if they don't know, it should help to suppress those prices.
Do you realistically think that'll ever get built and that we should even rely on that as baseload energy, given where we are today?
I do think it realistically will get built. We have projects that are under construction or have been constructed in other states in the U.S., and that's not even, getting into other projects that have been constructed and are in operation around the world. Obviously, I understand the industry has had issues over the past few years.
Of course, which you guys did not cause, to be fair. I mean, you inherited this, so.
Thank you for, I did not cause the offshore wind.
So is there anything in this bill that will provide immediate relief for the lack of electricity in state, in Maryland, or for ratepayers?
Thank you, Delegate, for the question, and really elevating the struggles that not only just your constituents, but everybody's constituents and all the Marylanders are facing. And, we are hearing that from every day, and our constituents' offices have gotten, numbers of calls in the thousands, if not more, right? And these are immediate challenges. And I know this body not so long ago held a number of hearings with utility companies and others, try to have a better understanding about why these are causing and what could we do to address those, right? Well, your constituents, Marylanders, all of them are facing those challenges. Maryland is not alone on this, right? In our entire RTO, right, everybody is facing those spikes in their energy cost. So, very recently, Governor Moore and our office have been working with our neighboring states, and most recently, Governor Moore supported Governor Shapiro's call to intervene with PJM, right, in their next capacity auction, and supported, the auction results with the price for next auction would go down. Something that our administration also has been doing is, at the directive of our administration, MEA has been vigorously participating in all of the rate cases in front of PSC and advocating for Maryland ratepayers' interest. This is a drastic change from the previous administration, and we are continuously going to pursue the ratepayer impact on this. And then the last piece to address your question, we've been having discussions with, legislatures, speakers, Senate President, the members here as well, to address these real and immediate challenges that the Marylanders are facing. There's a number of those bills that is going to come through here, and you will see us at various factors to come to a solution, right? This legislation, it's a part of the larger puzzle that our state is facing on energy right now. Right, so we would love to collaborate with you and the body here to address those concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for presenting the bill. Question on the nuclear energy piece of this legislation. So you talk about the application process and the manner in which the PSC opens that up to other applicants and all. Is this generation, is it regulated or deregulated generation?
So, as a generation type, nuclear is very heavily regulated. You would, as you go through this process, you would have this process which would provide the subsidy over the long term. But you would have basically a CPCM process run by the State Public Service Commission, which would likely be running concurrently with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission process as well. So anything for nuclear is heavily regulated. We know that this would be a thorough, long-term process that we would be going through to actually find a place and site a nuclear facility. And so this is, be a very thoroughly reviewed process.
But you're talking also about long-term pricing schedules. So you're establishing rate schedules, I guess, to make sure it's a viable project. Are those? So this is not when I ask about regulated versus deregulated. These prices aren't going to be determined by the market. They're going to be set.
Correct. They would be determined through the process at the PSC, similar to the OREC process that we have for offshore wind today.
Okay. And then you talk about the $6 million into the Maryland Clean Energy Fund. When would that payment be required? In the application process or once the project is constructed? It would be
before project construction. So we have a similar fund set up right now for offshore wind, and even though the offshore wind projects are not in operation, they have actually paid into the fund of those amounts over the years. We've actually been able to make investments in workforce development and things like that using that money. So it would be a similar process.
So that's not a refundable deposit if the project doesn't come to fruition?
It is not. That would come from, so similar to when Ørsted canceled their ORECs from Maryland last year, they had made these similar payments previously, and they were not refunded that. We retained that and used it for workforce development and investment.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to a little bit of what Delegate Fisher said. All we're getting right now is, and you said this, is we're getting hammered about rates. We're getting hammered about rates. And you mentioned a lot of stuff about it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. We've not seen, well, we've seen very little that's been addressed in bill-wise. Can you elaborate on what you think we're going to see that's going to help people out today?
Delegate, thank you for the question. And while I cannot address any specific legislations right now that the body is going to consider either this week or next week or any other weeks, but I can assure you that we would be here at the table and with this body and the leadership from both parties to address these concerns the best way possible.
You know, just me and the people that I talk to from my world, I've been in here for couple sessions, and I was here when we first started this conversation about wind. And I'm reading this bill and I see wind is a big part of it. I never thought it was really magic to figure out how you would bring wind from Europe over to here and why we had to study so hard to see something that was running over there, and we had all the history. So we're focusing now on the wind and solar, and I go back to solar starting in 2004, we started with the clean energy. And here we are 21 years later, and what do we have? Less than 8% of our energy is produced on wind and solar. And I keep asking, and people keep asking me, why are we continually doubling down on things that have not been successful in 20 years?
So I think we are not where we want to be in terms of our solar and wind deployments. But, you know, look, there are very real benefits to this. I mean, we for instance, did this modeling exercise at MEA. And for solar deployments, for instance, it has very real benefits directly on costs over the long term. When you have a generation source on the grid that basically produces energy at a zero cost fuel, so in this case, the sun, that really does help to drive down these local wholesale rates that do directly impact consumers. So there are multiple benefits to trying to bring this generation on. You know, I recognize that there has been fits and starts and difficulties along the way, but I think that is probably par for the course for any type of new industry, especially in any type of new complex clean energy industry. But we still think that it is prudent to move forward on that.
And Delegate, I'll add additional thing, right? In terms of any new investment in new generation, whether, whether that is storage, whether that is solar, wind, or even nuclear, right? There is a number of things that are within the state's control, number of things that at the local level control, and there's a lot of different requirements. So while we recognize that, we have fallen behind in some capacity, we're still trying to identify the way to move forward and address those challenges as well. And of course, I will readdress this, that this bill is a part of the larger puzzle, right? Our intent here is not to solve everything through this legislation, right? Our intent here is to collaborate with the General Assembly body to come up with a comprehensive approach to address the energy issues that our state is facing.
I think I'm coming from the side that I understand we want to be renewable. I'm good with wanting to be clean, but when you say the words like we fall behind, there's not a state on the PJM right now that's over 10%, produces over 10% of their energy renewable in clean wind or solar. And we're not falling behind. We're actually probably ahead of most. And by going with these goals and not adjusting what we're looking at and trying to keep things online while we can to help the ratepayers, we're pushing forward harder and harder on something that just has not worked. I mean, arguably, every place I speak, I ask, how many people have solar on their rooftops? And I'll get a handful, maybe a handful of people will tell me that. And it's a little bit hard to continue to go out to tell people who are punishing me, sitting back saying, what are you doing? Look at my rates. They were doubled. Your usage means something. But when we look at our rates, we have to start talking about what about the ratepayer? There's a lot going on in this state. Nothing's going down, and this continues to go up. And I understand we're going to see a couple more rate increases from quite shortly. And it's really difficult as a legislator to go out there and continually fight this. Wouldn't you agree? I'm done. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, so I just have a couple probing questions. I don't want to get into the politics of offshore wind inherently because it's a much bigger bill than that. But the question that I do have on this is when you say, and this is on page 3 of the fiscal note, that we're changing the definition of a qualified offshore wind project such that the project can be located on PJM as opposed to a point located on the Delmarva Peninsula. Where else would you locate the connection if offshore wind is off the coast of Maryland?
You could conceivably run a line, I think as Delegate Charcuti mentioned earlier, New Jersey or North Carolina or Virginia, those are all potential landing sites, but you would still be under the restriction that it would, of course, have to connect to the PJM network, which, of course, Maryland is a part of.
So it's been a long time, and Delegate Ahrens is right. We've been hearing offshore wind for almost the entirety of my political career, which is 11 years here. But I remember the cost of 1 mile of underwater connection to be $1 million. It was $1 million per mile. And that was back early. Let's just say it was 10 years ago. That was the number quoted. What is the cost today to run 1 mile of underwater cable?
Off the top of my head, I'm sorry, Delegate, I do not know, but I think it's more than $1 million per mile.
More than $1 million
yeah.
a mile. And then let's just take New Jersey by way of example. Do we know how many miles the Maryland Offshore Wind Project is to a point south of New Jersey?
I am not certain of the mileage, Delegate, sorry.
100 miles maybe? 100 million?
We can get you that information.
All right, so maybe we could follow up and get an answer on that. The reason why I asked that question is that the next paragraph in the fiscal note says that we, through this wind procurement process administered by PSC, is going to be modified to remove existing ratepayer limits and maximize offshore wind renewable energy credits. And in its place, we were making PSC, that we were allowing PSC to determine the maximum amount of ratepayer impact and ORIC prices. But the question I have is that it says that PSC must keep any determined amount confidential. So through the lens of Delegate Ahrens' point, which is we're talking all about energy prices and we're talking about the impacts that are happening to people throughout the state will continue, why would we have anything at the Public Service Commission, especially as it relates to rates or inputs that lead to what the rates for citizens pay, to be confidential?
Sure, Delegate. That's a fair point, right? Like, consider this away from offshore wind, any other procurement in the state, right? Any procurement that the state does, whether that is in the DGS, whether that is for any other subjects, those procurement, the state does not come out and say that this is the amount the state is willing to pay, now go ahead and provide your bid, right? However, in offshore wind industry, for any of those procurements, we have a statutory cap that is public. So let's say if I'm a developer, I already know how much a state is willing to pay. I will always go to the upper limit to submit my bid and not willing to negotiate my prices down, right? So, and Maryland is only one of the two states, and for a very long time, Maryland was the only state that had explicitly shown how much the state is willing to pay on behalf of the ratepayer.
I'm sorry, but you're missing my point. The point is that process, it was a bidding process. I understand why the bid process would be private or confidential up until the date with which PSC made a decision that we're going to accept this bid, and then we make the bid public. What you're doing under this bill is you're saying that the Public Service Commission will no longer use a bidding process, and that it's instead, PSC is going to be allowed to determine on their own the maximum amount of ratepayer impact and OREC prices. So I ask again, without bidding, you're basically allowing the Public Service Commission to choose for themselves what the rate impact's going to be, and when they make that decision, that it's going to be confidential.
So, Delegate, it is still a competitive bidding process. That component remains intact. It is meant. PSC
is instead allowed to determine the maximum amount of ratepayer impact and OREC prices. That doesn't say bid process. That means that they determine.
Correct. So that amount is shifted under the PSC umbrella to determine based on market dynamics. That component is kept private from the developers so they do not know. So now when you have multiple developers, ideally 2 or more, that come in and engage in a competitive bidding process for projects in Maryland, so you have the price suppression from that, and then they also don't know what, in this case, the PSC has set as the upper limit, and that should help that competitive process drive prices down.
Last question.
Real quick, maybe I can just clarify. Same process, but the process now, everybody gets to see it, so they could theoretically back into the number, versus the process you're proposing is nobody knows what the number is. So if it's over that, then that just gets shellacked, correct?
That's correct.
I just find it's odd that we would be talking about anything being confidential in the lens of what's going on with energy pricing right now. Last question. The amount determined by PSC to dissuade withdrawal from OEC process. So there is going to be an additional escrow amount. Where's that money coming from?
That would come from the developer.
The developer is going to pay into an account determined by PSC to dissuade withdrawal from the OREC process. You're saying the developer is going to pay money into a escrow in an amount to keep them from withdrawing from the OREC process?
So it is not meant to be a large punitive penalty. What it is meant to do is basically to have the developer make a small deposit. So if they were to withdraw from the OREC process or to cancel their OREC awards, what would happen is that the small-ish amount of money in that escrow account would then be sent to the state, and the state will basically use that to cover the costs for the analysis and review of the projects.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, I meant to ask this earlier. So you said this was a comprehensive approach, and we've heard discussion about immediate need, immediate relief, and we have all these closed power plants around the state. And we had a lady here the other day from the nuclear industry, and said the obvious choice is to retrofit some of those with natural gas, nuclear, whatever. But this bill doesn't even mention natural gas. Why has that been excluded as an option?
I mean, look, our charge was to try and find a way to increase generation in the state, but also increase clean generation in the state. So we, stemming from the study that we did, we tried to find the best approach to do that. And that basically led us to this mechanism. We tried to use whatever we had at our disposal that was clean and that we thought we could feasibly get on the grid in a timely manner as possible, and that's what led us to this.
So, but we've heard testimony about natural gas with hydrogen being developed that has zero emissions. So that's an industry you've chose to exclude as an option?
I don't think we chose to. We didn't choose to exclude it. I think we had to make some judgment calls on what we thought was most likely to be built. Like I don't think our office has any issue with a gas plant with green fuels or hydrogen or carbon capture or anything like that. but those technologies do seem a little further away than something like nuclear. But those, as they progress and mature, should definitely be part of the solution, and it should definitely be looked at.
It just seems like natural gas could be built quicker with the existing plants that are closed versus the 8 to 10 year process for a nuclear plant.
Delegate, I hear your concern about, and I'll simplify that, concern about resource adequacy that everybody is facing right now, and this body is addressing, right? This legislation, the governor is focused on in-state generation, in-state clean generation development. That was the guidance, and that's the North Star that we utilized when we created this legislation. So, our goal here is to how do we invest more in-state generation that is clean and benefited for Marylanders, also invest in more next-generation workforce development associated with those industries.
So you just don't consider natural gas to be clean, correct?
Sir, we consider clean energy under this legislation as everything that is in the renewable energy portfolio plus nuclear.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, it says tier 2, on page 4 of the bill, you're down in like line 19. It talks about tier 1 and tier 1 and tier 2 renewable energy sources. It seems like we'll be moving forward with the clean energy portfolio standard. Is nuclear going to be in its own third tier?
So consider this, the clean energy portfolio is the umbrella figure, and underneath you have the renewable energy portfolio that has tier 1 and tier 2, and then the third factor for the clean energy is the nuclear.
So it would be in its own bucket?
That's correct.
So as far as consumable energy is concerned, would it have its own pricing module per kilowatt hour? Would that be higher or lower? Is it the administration's intent? And I know we're half a dozen years out, but I just want to get a sort of a sense of the direction that we would be going, because nuclear's coming. I think it's right to put it in its own tier, but I want to get a sense on the direction that we're going as far as the cost per kilowatt hour, since it's going to, quite frankly, contribute under the clean energy standard the most towards meeting our goal.
So look, in terms of, Delegate, in terms of capital costs, nuclear is more costly. I think it remains to be seen, depending on deployment type technology, things like that, how the per megawatt hour cost will flesh out. And let me give you an example. So when you have a plant like a small modular reactor, like at X Energy, if you can, for instance, site that closer to industrial facilities like they're doing with the Dow facility, you can conceivably utilize and monetize the waste heat coming from the plant in addition to what it's generating. And so why is that important? Because as you boost revenues, that of course reduces the per megawatt hour cost. So even though you might have higher upfront capital costs, there are ways, if you can monetize and boost revenues of the plant, depending on its location and its revenues, you can lower that per megawatt hour cost.
Delegate, if I add one other thing, on page 37 of this bill, line 23 and 24, there's a specific mention in terms of ratepayer protection under nuclear procurement for new nuclear projects that will happen on the state as well.
Because I agree with you, but there's also life cycle management to take into account as well. Return on investment over time. We're looking at Calvert Cliffs is going to be around for, it looks like 80 years now, where we certainly would have done complete retrofitting and switchovers of other clean energy, wind, quite frankly, new fans. But again, is it the administration's intent to charge more or less per kilowatt hour by putting nuclear in its own third tier, on its own bucket?
I think it's certainly the intent to drive overall system costs down. I think as we're trying to look at this and the modeling effort that we did, you can't necessarily look at just one generation type. You have to look at the system, what nuclear is enabling on the system as a whole. Nuclear is of course, a very flexible source of power. All of that contributes to the overall system, and I think what we're trying to do is drive costs lower over the long run, and one way that you do that is by having reliable, dependable supply on the grid.
I'll let it go. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions for this panel, next we'll go to Evan Vaughn, Joel Harrington, and Rebecca Rare.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yep, start when ready.
Go first. Great. Hello, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Good to see you. My name is Evan Vaughn. I'm Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition. So we represent utility-scale wind, solar, and storage developers that are active here in Maryland and across the PJM grid. We're here today to speak favorable with amendments on the governor's legislation. It moves Maryland toward a 100% clean energy mix, as we've talked about. We support that. Specifically, I'm going to speak to the offshore wind components of the bill. We think this bill is needed to modernize Maryland's offshore wind policies to reflect the growth in electricity demand that we're all seeing and that many folks in the committee have alluded to. You all are well aware of that. As a reminder, U.S. Wind's project will be bringing on 1,700 megawatts of clean energy with a high capacity factor to Maryland's eastern shore. It will lower the skyrocketing capacity market prices by adding capacity supply. These projects produce the most energy at night and during the winter, which is compatible with growing solar energy as well. Diversification of the electricity mix is the only real way to address the reliability challenges that we're facing. Natural gas, for example, can fail. We saw that during Winter Storm Elliott a few years ago, where gas was largely responsible for the lack of reliability. To address the elephant in the room, we are facing just a smidge of policy uncertainty due to the changes in federal administration. But the offshore wind industry is here to stay, and we appreciate that Governor Moore and the bill sponsors are taking a stand for common sense energy policy that doesn't throw out the work that the state has done for all these years leading up till now. We do believe there's a path forward to offshore wind development, even over the next 4 years. There's 5 projects currently under construction in the United States. 5 commercial scale offshore wind projects are being built right now. There's 3 of them operating. So this is a real industry. It's proven, it's operating, and delivering clean electrons to folks on the East Coast. So we do encourage a favorable report. I'll just say the amendments that we have are mostly looking at parity between different energy resources. We want to make sure that whatever incentives are developed benefit offshore wind similar to other energy sources. We would also support amending energy storage into the bill, which can come online faster than any other dispatchable resource for Maryland to address the near-term resource adequacy challenges. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Rare, and I'm the Director of Climate Policy and Justice for Maryland League of Conservation Voters. We are here favorable with amendments on HB 505. We are grateful for the governor's leadership on climate and clean energy initiatives and appreciate this bill as another step towards achieving 100% clean electricity. We appreciate that the bill seeks to update and advance Maryland's offshore wind policies, as well as the amendments offered by the administration to determine a date for the state to reasonably achieve 100% clean electricity. The amendments we are offering in our written testimony are focused on tightening up some of the language on the nuclear provisions and adding procurement mechanisms for battery storage in Maryland. Battery storage represents an important piece of grid stability and reliability, and we believe is part of the solution to reduce ratepayer impacts. We hope to see clean energy policies advance this session that promote storage on our grid, that include labor provisions and ratepayer protections. Thank you, and we urge a favorable report with these considerations.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joel Harrington. I'm here with Rev Renewables. Rev supports the Energize Act with amendments. Rev is a owner, operator, and developer of energy storage, solar, pump storage, hydro across the United States. We currently have about 3 gigawatts of solar, pump storage, and energy storage and wind across the U.S. In Maryland, we just completed a 20-megawatt utility-scale solar project in Allegheny County on reclaimed coal mine land, and we're hoping to build a 300-megawatt utility-scale solar project in Garrett County on reclaimed coal mine land as well. We also own the 13-megawatt solar facility in Charles County. We have employees that live and work in Maryland. and hope to continue to make investments and have the appropriate policy mechanisms that continue to help us build here. In PJM, there's approximately 1,700 megawatts of installed capacity in the queue for solar. That's slightly more than the generating capacity of the state's largest generating plant. Today, I want to speak to the ACP freeze in the bill and thank the administration and the sponsors for offering that language. According to the Energy and Information Administration, about 13% of Maryland's total in-state electricity in 2023 came from clean energy. And mostly that was from small distributed solar generation. The need today, if we're looking at bringing on new generation, is transmission-connected generation. And we think that the freezing the ACP will set the maximum price which suppliers will purchase RECs. It'll substantially send the right signal for us to come and invest in Maryland. We will, instead of turning to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and DC. It's a simple mechanism. We hope you'll support it, and we thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no questions for this panel, we have Bill Temick, Bryson Popham, Josh Tolkien, and Robin Dutta. Please start whenever you get up here. Just keep rolling through.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bryson Popham appearing before you on behalf of the Building Owners and Managers Association of Greater Baltimore, which is a trade association of commercial office buildings and industrial buildings throughout central Maryland. If you drive up 95, when you get to Baltimore and look over to your left, you'll see a number of our member buildings. We are here in support of this legislation, and it's really because of the acronym we've heard today that I've heard for the first time and heard it numerous times today, and that acronym is SMR, Small Modular Reactor. We were very pleased to see the policy change of the state that expressly recognizes nuclear as clean energy. And we are also equally enthusiastic about the prospects, which have been described by some of the previous witnesses, for variations in the provision of nuclear energy beyond the large plants such as Calvert Cliffs. So we are working with your colleagues down at ENT on other legislation, and unfortunately we don't have the meeting of the minds on that one yet, but on this we can enthusiastically support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chair.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Josh Tolkien. On behalf of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club, we urge a favorable report with amendments. First and foremost, we applaud that this legislation is moving the state forward on its commitment to transition to clean renewable energy. This has been a long pursuit of Maryland, and I think it's good to ground ourselves in why it started. 15 years ago, Maryland was one of the had some of the worst air pollution on the East Coast. We had significant amounts of childhood asthma, people suffering from ingestion of mercury, which harms pregnant mothers and children, deposition of nitrogen into the Chesapeake Bay. The efforts to transition are not just about climate change or, quote, clean energy, but about improving public health and the health of the Bay. We do recognize that Maryland has made progress, but significant changes are needed to accelerate our clean energy deployment. We think that the solution is contained in several different bills. There are solutions in this legislation, the Abundant Affordable Clean Energy Act, the Affordable Grid Act being discussed later today, that a lot of the tools are packaged up into different bills before the General Assembly. A couple flags. We do want to emphasize the importance of considering the role that storage can play in offsetting our peak demand. One of the ways that we can keep our capacity prices under control. It will surprise nobody that Sierra Club has and continues to have concerns about state policy incentivizing nuclear energy. This is discussed in our written testimony. We're excited that there is so much energy and emphasis on energy and clean energy this year, and we look forward to working with the sponsors. Thank the governor for his leadership and with the committee to come up with solutions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Robin Dutta. I'm the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association. On behalf of our members, we ask for a favorable with amendments action by the committee on HB 505. We appreciate all the work that's been put into this bill, and as has been said, this is one piece and of a much broader conversation. And this committee's already been hearing a lot this session and beforehand of the widening energy gap facing Maryland. What we believe is that solar and storage can play a big role, but it's energy is complicated, as it always is. The energy gap and the problems currently being faced by the state are complicated. And so while we feel that the solar portions of this bill do take a step forward and do provide some relief, in order to be a bigger part of the solution, it's important for a more nuanced approach to look at, instead of what's largely a one-size-fits-all kind of version 1 renewable portfolio standard for solar, the solar carve-out, SRECs, to evolve the program in a way that treats different types of solar in different ways, and this is included in some of the amendments that we offer. I'll also add and echo what's been said around battery storage. When we can deploy a whole lot of storage, whether that's transmission connected or on the distribution grid or paired with local distributed generation, there's so much we can do around reducing peak demand. Just as energy efficiency can be the cheapest form of conserving energy by not producing it in the first place, offsetting peak demand at the source is also then going to be one of the cheapest ways to mitigate and handle it in the first place. And that can avoid a whole lot of what could be unnecessary additional poles and wires, and then that's also then costs that Marylanders don't have to face. So if our amendments can be adopted, we do urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Temick. I don't really represent anybody. I'm from Harford County. I'm an environmentalist and a community organizer up there. I'm here basically because I really think we got to get the nuclear piece going. And I think this will pass because it looks like it's going to pass. But that's only like the first step, maybe not. That's only the first step because I work with a lot of environmental groups and community groups, and fear is a driving factor. People are afraid of nuclear. And so I put together a fact sheet on different aspects of nuclear. On safety, it is safe. Nuclear waste are safe. And now they now have the ability to use nuclear waste as energy source, which gets rid of the waste, and gets you more nuclear energy. It's likely to be faster than people think because if you look around at what's going on around the country, Texas alone is now building 4 new nuclear, different types of technologies on their University of Texas campus. And I think the one thing everybody's worried about cost, and I think costs are obviously going to be a problem. Nobody knows what it's going to be for anything. But I would say if you're trying to bring, say, natural gas in, and we're trying to get a clean energy goal of 100% clean energy on the grid by 2035, the incentive for natural gas, it could take them 4 years to build a plant. They're going to have to charge a lot to make their money back. If you do nuclear, and nuclear keeps getting more of these industrial production line nuclear energy small modular reactors, that'll continue to get cheaper. So that'll get us in the right direction. So I urge you to pass the bill, and I hope you really start looking at nuclear because you've got to face your folks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, can solar panels power a data center?
I'm not an expert on data centers. I couldn't speak to
Gotcha.
that.
And I'm curious, because we've known each other for a long time, and you've always been opposed to nuclear for as long as I've been here. In fact, vehemently opposed. But you're now for nuclear?
Well, no.
You're not for nuclear now? Because you're testifying for the bill. I'm just trying to figure out what's happened.
Sorry, to clarify it, in our written comments, it clarifies the parts of the bill that we are supportive of and the parts where we are raising concerns about. And we explicitly have concerns about the nuclear section of the bill.
What part of what is your concern about the nuclear again?
Well, Sierra Club's position on nuclear is set by the National Sierra Club Board of Directors and is fairly, I would say, unilateral when it comes to state policy incentivizing nuclear energy. We oppose the facilitation of a long-term contract between the Public Service Commission and a nuclear energy provider.
So, but not with solar?
Correct.
Okay, so nuclear in your mind, that's what I'm trying to get to. Nuclear in your mind is not clean energy?
We have specific concerns about nuclear. It's not as simple as clean or not clean. We are concerned about everything from the mining to the long-term safety, as well as the economics.
And you don't know, you're not an expert on whether solar can actually power quantum computing centers or AI centers?
Well, solar by itself, which would not be running at night, would not be able to run a data center, which requires energy 24/7.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, Josh, I appreciated that exchange back and forth. And my observation is that small modular reactors are not only going to be a viable technology, I believe it's going to be a leading technology that expands clean forms of energy. So the question that I have, I represent the Eastern Shore, Midshore, and the rumor is at some point in the next 5 to 7 years, there could be, depending on what technology it looks like, a location where a small modular reactor will be located on the shore. And we would want Sierra Club to be on the side of this, I would think. The environmentalists would want to see that in lieu of other forms of energy for two reasons. One, and then I'm going to ask you whether I'm right or wrong, but one is the ratepayer impact. I mean, it would be a inexpensive form of energy. The area that we're hearing that this is going to happen would replace the unclean version of energy, so it would be an improvement. But I'm curious where Sierra Club sits in the long run. The mining part, let me just say, batteries, it's cobalt, so there's all kinds of mining no matter what the technology is.
Right.
But why would Sierra Club not be on the side of, like me, at a groundbreaking where a small modular reactor is being located? Because it's going to help everybody. It'll probably end up helping industries that you would like to see advanced, because we have to have baseload, reliable, inexpensive forms of energy. That's what small modular reactors are.
Well, thank you for the question. And question, Delegate Fisher, I think you may have been out of the room last time I testified, and I was disappointed at the lack of questions coming my way. Defied some expectations. So to your question, I think first and foremost, we're concerned about the economics. I'm very interested in your point that SMR would be delivered at a inexpensive rate. Our understanding is that right now there's one SMR plant that's essentially in a pilot project and is significantly over budget. That being said, it's an emerging technology. Sierra Club is constantly evaluating different technologies and weighing the costs and the benefits. As you said, there is no energy source that is without its impact. So it's not a matter of saying clean or not clean. We do put it into those categories, but everything has some impact. And if we don't generate any electricity, then the impact will be in new transmission. So at this point, we are significantly concerned about the economic impact of essentially rate basing or enabling the Public Service Commission to rate base the cost of construction. I would argue that if it was cost competitive with coal on the market, you would not need to facilitate that type of financial arrangement with the Public Service Commission.
I'm just thinking that you and a representative like me would align. I'm a rural representative from the Eastern Shore, and we generally would like to see our waterways, our farmland, and to the extent that we can keep it the way it is, that would be a good thing. And so I'm not saying that small modular reactors are a panacea, but what I'm saying is that there is a likelihood that you and I, hopefully I'll run for re-election and win, but at some point in my political career, you may be asked again, would you be willing to come and join us on the Eastern Shore to do a groundbreaking on a technology that could advance everybody's interest? That's what whether I support the bill or not, I think that's generally where we're headed as a state, right? So that's, I'll give you the last word.
Well, thank you, and I welcome the chance to sit down and talk with you about this more. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned the Sierra Club Board of Directors and Executive Committee. Are any of those 15 individuals located in Maryland?
Yes, I believe one member of the Sierra Club Board of Directors, I believe, is located.
Where are the rest located?
All over the country.
All over the country. And
They're elected. We are a member-based organization, so they're elected.
I know
by
you
our
have
membership.
satellite offices, basically,
Yeah.
here, yeah. But you have one member of the Board of Directors that lives in, that is domiciled in Maryland.
Correct. So Sierra Club is a national organization, and our national board of directors
I understand the
spread.
structure, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that they were aware of what the ratepayers in Maryland is, what, you know, what they were facing, what was going on. They made such a rigid stance on nuclear.
Yes, I believe that the Sierra Club's position is largely based on concerns about the economics. I don't know where the disconnect is between our read on the financial incentives embedded in what I believe is called the price schedule in this bill and in the other legislation. But I think there is a disconnect between our understanding of the financials required to get nuclear going and some of the proponents. I think we share your concern about ratepayer impact, and I welcome the chance to talk more about it. Thanks.
Josh, as always, you did a great job, and I know it's not always easy to get boxed in like you're doing. Hopefully one day you run for president of the entire Sierra Club. Okay, so now we will go to the unfavorables. We have Alfred Bartlett and Paul Ellington, and then we have one virtual.
Kind of lonely up here. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm Dr. Alfred Bartlett. I live in Montgomery County, and I'm representing Physicians for Social Responsibility. PSR works to prevent the greatest risks to human health. We appreciate the governor's and the administration's urgency to speed up our lagging progress toward 100% clean energy, but a core part, we're talking about it, of HB 505 is the proposal to develop new nuclear energy, or small modular reactors, as a form of clean energy. This is why we oppose the bill, because while nuclear energy doesn't produce greenhouse gases, it is definitely not clean. Nuclear energy produces deadly waste in the form of the spent fuel that's taken out of the reactor and stored on site. It is extremely dangerous. This is 2 500 milligram tablets of extra strength Tylenol. That's a standard adult dose. A person exposed for 30 seconds, a yard away from the equivalent amount of spent fuel, will die in days despite medical care. But the worst threat is generational. This spent fuel waste remains deadly for thousands of years. The half-life of plutonium-239, one of the major components of spent fuel, is 24,000 years. But the worst, the deadly legacy that we're leaving to coming generations, we have no safe way to get rid of it. It's too dangerous to move, and the U.S. has never succeeded in finding a safe place to put it all. So it stays at the reactor site where it's made. Calvert Cliffs already has about 1,500 tons of this spent fuel. Having SMRs scattered around the state means that each one will become another site for this radioactive forever waste, with more possibilities for an accident, a leak, or a terrorist attack. In requesting an unfavorable report on this bill, we recommend instead passing the bills that support thoughtful long-term planning and that will remove constraints and provide effective incentives so we can build the renewable energy that we can build right now that's affordable and truly clean. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll now go to the virtual witness, Timothy Judson. Sir, go ahead and start when ready.
Great. Thank you, Chair Wilson and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Timothy Judson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nuclear Information and Resource Service, which is a nonprofit organization based in Montgomery County. In my written testimony, I detailed the persistent problems with cost overruns and delays that have plagued nuclear construction for the last 50 years. But I want to focus on today in my testimony are the reasons why states have had such a difficult time controlling the costs and the schedules of nuclear construction projects, basically across the country in just about every case. The reality is that, applying the procurement process that the state has developed for offshore wind projects to nuclear energy projects is simply, misunderstanding the nature of nuclear construction projects and what makes them so difficult to control. Offshore wind projects, like many other renewable energy projects, once they begin construction, can be built in 2 to 3 years. Nuclear reactor projects, you generally take more than 10 years for construction, and that's been persistent across the last 50 years of nuclear development in the U.S. So typically what happens when a nuclear project is proposed is that the utility or the developer comes in with an unrealistically low cost estimate, and that is approved and given the green light because utility commissions don't have the expertise. There are not enough comparable projects to be able to credibly question the cost estimates that are provided. Then, the construction projects take, 10 years or more. And, and in the course of construction, the costs creep up and new costs are submitted to the regulator, and the regulator continues to defer to the developer. And this often happens, not only because the utility commissions don't have the expertise, to evaluate the costs, but also because once billions of dollars have been invested and hundreds of jobs have been created in construction, it's politically controversial to pull the plug on these projects. And so what I would submit to the committee is, if a nuclear reactor project began construction in Maryland, and 3 or 4 or 5 years into the project, the schedule was delayed, the billions of dollars in costs, had increased, would you be willing to pull the plug on that project? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, seeing no questions for this panel, that concludes this bill hearing. We have 10 more bills to go. Next, we will go to House Bill 1111, Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
Bring my panel?
Yeah.
Or my one?
I got Steve Silverman and Paul.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing me to introduce House Bill 1111 today. House Bill 111 is kind of an extension of last year's bill, the Brighter Tomorrow Act. And essentially all this bill does is include brownfields and floating fields for solar SRECs. That's the meat of the bill. We do have some amendments which Mr. Silverman will talk about that takes MACO from unfavorable to favorable with amendments that we've agreed upon. I'll let him discuss those. But that's really the essence of the bill. It's really, really simple. We just left it out last year, so we're just trying to close the loop and make sure that we have a level playing field, whether that's on a pond or whether that's on a brown field, so that everybody that can qualify for those SRECs. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. I'm Steve Silverman. I'm here on behalf of David John Frankel, the founder of Centennial, a solar development company with locations in New York and Timonium. They have developed solar projects in Maryland and neighboring states as well. Centennial specializes in solar projects on underutilized spaces such as commercial rooftops, brownfields, and water retention ponds where development would otherwise be challenging. Under Maryland's community solar program, the projects would provide 4 key benefits. Number 1, lower electricity costs for ratepayers. Number 2, privately financed megawatt scale solar generation that can be installed within months. 3, increased net operating income for property owners through lease payments. And 4, creation of both permanent and temporary construction jobs. For property owners with water retention ponds, industrial quarries, and reservoirs, we have the opportunity to install floating solar projects which will conserve valuable land and strengthen grid resilience by diversifying Maryland's renewable energy mix. Given these benefits, we strongly support the inclusion of floating solar projects within the framework of the Brighter Tomorrow Act. We've worked with MACO on some technical amendments which define the floating pond as a water retention pond or a quarry currently or previously designated for industrial use, and we would appreciate a favorable report with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions for this panel, that concludes this bill hearing. Next, we'll go to Delegate Johnson, House Bill 1233. Bring up your panel and start when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is going to be another self-storage bill. No, I'm just joking, real quick. The essence of this bill, Mr. Chair and members, is simply LMI, low to moderate income, and subscribers to open it up for them to subscribe all across the state of Maryland into community solar. So in Harford County, there's a supply and demand problem in Harford County where we have people that want to be in community solar, but there's not a lot of solar that they can get in Harford County. But conversely, in Cecil County, there's a lot of supply on the Cecil County side. So we would like for folks in Harford County to be able to subscribe into solar in Cecil County to reduce their bills, their electric bills, and especially with the rising costs of our electric bills. So with that, Mr. Chair and committee members, I ask for a favorable report, and I'll turn it over to my panel.
Vice Chair Crosby and members of the Economic Matters Committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on House Bill 1233. My name is Leah Meredith. I am the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director of the Solar Energy Industries Association, or SEIA. Founded in 1974, SEIA is the National Trade Association for the Solar and Storage Industries, which employs nearly 5,000 Marylanders and is home to more than 200 solar businesses. It is critical that Maryland invest in new sources of electricity generation and encourage the development of clean, domestic, local job-producing solar generation. HB 1233 accomplishes this while also ensuring more Marylanders are able to take advantage of the bill savings associated with community solar. When this legislative body passed the permanent community solar program in 2023, it required community solar projects to have 40% of their subscribers be low or moderate income utility customers, thus taking an important step to ensure that the benefits of solar energy can flow to all Marylanders. However, conflicting with the community solar program's dual goals of maximizing bill savings to LMI households and deploying additional in-state renewable energy generation is the requirement that community solar customers be located in the same utility service territory as the solar facility to which they are subscribed. The reality is that Maryland's utility service territories vary in their suitability for hosting sufficient community solar projects to meet the demand from LMI customers. There is a high number of eligible LMI customers in the BGE and PEPCO electric service territories, but also limited market potential for viable community solar projects there. Potomac Edison and Delmarva service territories have high market potential for community solar, but lower percentage of LMI subscribers as a part of their rate base. And thus we're already starting to see community solar development slow in those service territories of Delmarva because of the LMI subscribers will soon be saturated once a portion of the planned projects are built. Thanks for the opportunity to testify. We urge a favorable report on House Bill 1233.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. David Murray, Director of Business Development for Turning Point Energy. We're a community solar developer that's been in Maryland since the program's inception in 2017. What I really think that strikes me as this bill is we can all agree that there's no silver bullet solution to Maryland's energy problem of higher energy rates and the need to deploy more in-state resources. Instead, we need an all players on the field approach. Ensure that that we have enough tools in our toolbox to not only keep rates as low as we can, but ensure that we're not losing a step in our efforts to deploy clean in-state resources, namely community solar. And so I applaud Delegate Johnson for introducing this bill, because right now, less than 1% of BGE and PEPCO low to moderate income customers have access to community solar. And what this bill plans to do is increase that number by 28,000 LMI households. And we're able to do that by ensuring that if you're a low to moderate income household in Maryland, you should be able to subscribe and receive bill credit savings to a community solar facility that's located anywhere in Maryland. Now, we intentionally drafted this bill to be concise, to ensure that the regulatory details can be worked out at the Public Service Commission through a robust stakeholder work group, of which my company and several other companies, the utilities, ratepayer advocates are a part. And we're confident that the progress that we've made through the net metering work group, which is implemented consolidated billing, upgrading utility billing systems, and allowing for the modernization of our subscriber management system, we have both the technical capacity and the will to do it. Because I think that ensuring that we can increase access to bill savings for tens of thousands of Marylanders is well worth it. Thank you so much, and I'll yield to my next colleague.
Chair Wilson and esteemed members of the Economic Matters Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I'm James Feinstein, the Policy Director for Arcadia, which is a community solar subscriber manager. Arcadia is a climate tech company more broadly, and we focus on both energy data access and community solar. In the community solar industry alone, Arcadia manages more than 12,000 households subscribed to more than 143 megawatts of projects in Maryland today. And nationwide, we serve more than 200,000 households subscribed to more than 2 gigawatts of community solar, making us the largest community solar subscriber manager in the country. As the CSAG's community solar program exists in Maryland today, all households interested in community solar may only subscribe to projects located in their own utility service territory. This prohibits them from subscribing to projects located in other territories. And that is problematic because the supply of projects and the demand from customers are not evenly matched in those territories. As such, you have some territories like BG&E and PEPCO where there's an overabundance of interested customers who don't have projects to readily subscribe to, and Delmarva and Potomac Edison where you have projects but not many interested subscribers. That means that any interested household in Potomac Edison can readily join a project today, but those in Baltimore Gas and Electric do not have the same ability. So this legislation would allow statewide LMI demand for projects to meet the statewide supply of those projects, and would allow all LMI households in the state to have equal access to community solar so they can support solar development and receive monthly bill savings. Maryland would not be the first state to deploy this. Massachusetts has allowed for cross-utility crediting in their NEM community solar program for a number of years, and recently expanded that to their entire 3,200 megawatt smart community solar program, which means all Maryland households have fair access to community solar. So I thank you for the time and urge a favorable report of 1233.
Delegate Pippi.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're like bookends. Well, I take your apology. Thank you.
This is a road between two thorns.
Oh, there you go. Just a quick question. I understand from the testimony that this is a great deal for you all because you'll sell more solar. But how is this handled on the BGE side? They're worried about how they'd manage this. Are you part of that fix?
James.
So it's a great question. So I think you'll hear from folks who will testify later that this is it's an insurmountable burden or require a huge billing system upgrade to implement. The reality is that's not the case, and that's not what they've seen in Massachusetts. Utilities are already handling 90% of this transaction today, right? There's a community solar project generating electricity and credits. There's a metering or measuring of that. And then the other half of the transaction, they are applying those credits to customers' bills. Utilities already do all of that. The only difference is now, after they do that first part of the transaction of measuring the generation, they will pass the credits instead of to individual customers to the sister utility, who will then do what they already do and apply those credits to customers' accounts. So the only new thing is, one, transaction between the utilities. All other steps are things the utilities are already doing today relatively efficiently.
So they'll be responsible for developing that software, whatever it is you're talking about, is that right?
Not necessarily.
Who will? You will?
So I think that's like, this gives discretion to this legislation gives discretion to the commission to determine if that should be the utilities developing that kind of accounting mechanism, or whether there's like another entity that should be in charge of that.
Okay, the last question. How will this affect the common ratepayer? Not the LMI, but the ratepayers.
So this should have no effect on that besides like any minimal cost of that accounting mechanism, because this wouldn't change the number of projects allowed or the credit rates or anything like that.
So whatever they do, will that go back to the LMI part of it? Or if they have to do software, it costs money, they'll go back to take part of the LMI piece, or where will they get that money?
So that's a good question too. I mean, I think this legislation, at least the way I read it, it leads that up to the commission to determine if there's a substantial cost, how that should be.
I understand, thanks.
So to kind of piggyback off of Delegate Aaron's, I'm sure the utilities are going to say, they can't figure out some app or some computer programming, which whatever. But I kind of come down on the same side of them, to be honest, because what you're saying here is, I knew that there were customers in this specific territory when I built, but I'm not going to work hard enough to sign them up for community solar. So now I want to open it all up so I can go get some magical LMI customers over here. There are LMI customers in the districts or the territories, to which you built. Go sign them up and don't go steal somebody else's territory or the LMI customers in those territories. Because as I read this bill, it's a money grab by the solar industry. So, okay, seeing no further questions, that concludes this panel. We'll go to the opposition. It's Ann Clace and Brittany Jones.
I'll jump right in. I think Ann's running a little late, so I'm happy to kind of cover for both of us. So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Brittany Jones, the director of BGE's Governmental and External Affairs team. We do respectfully oppose House Bill 1233. BGE and PHI are completely supportive of community solar, especially when it can benefit limited income customers. However, this bill does present technical implications that just make it impossible to do what the bill is requiring. So if the community solar generating system and limited income subscriber in different service areas, the electric company who receives the solar power export cannot credit the limited income subscriber since they're just not a customer of that particular electric company. So an example would be if you have a solar generator that's on the Western Shore and they're a Potomac Edison customer, so they're in that service area doing the generation, and a BGE customer would want to subscribe, Potomac Edison wouldn't have any way to be able to issue that bill credit because the relationships with us as their utility provider and not with Potomac Edison. Another technical implication involves jurisdictional issues associated with the recovery of the credit value for the load settlement. So with the solar export benefiting the solar territory of the one electric company and the subscriber credit issued in a different service area at a different electricity company's rate, the value of the credit would be inappropriately funded by customers in the subscriber service territory who did not benefit from that generated solar. So even if we could create some type of process, the credit value would be calculated by the electric company that serves the subscriber and would be inherently different from the electric company of the generator due to the difference in retail rate structures. So as much as we would love to support this and get to the point where we can, right now, technically, it's just not a viable option. So we do respectfully ask for an unfavorable report. Thank you.
You made it. I'm a little out of breath. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Ann Clace here on behalf of PEPCO and Delmarva Power in opposition to House Bill 1233. As discussed, House Bill 1233 repeals the requirement that a customer can only subscribe to a community solar project that is located in their electric service territory. While PEPCO and Delmarva Power recognize the tremendous benefits to community solar, we have concerns about this legislation due to the technical implications and costs in trying to create a mechanism to do this. We would have to redesign the structure of the program as we do not have the visibility to the generation and other service territories to provide those credits. If there's a difference in price in the different jurisdictions, there's no way to accurately capture that difference and credit the accounts appropriately. For those reasons, we respectfully oppose House Bill 1233 and happy to address any questions, and we'll continue to work with the bill sponsor.
Thank you. And seeing no further questions, that concludes this bill hearing. Next, we'll go to Delegate Adams, House Bill 1149, and I believe Ben Baker from the PSC is part of your panel.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. For the record, Delegate Chris Adams, presenting House Bill 1149, Public Service Commission full cost and benefits analysis of sources of electricity generation. Let me just say, like all of us here, with what's been going on with energy prices, I've been reading, doing research. I'm on the Committee of Jurisdiction, so I like to be informed. And I came across this idea along with our senator, who's the lead sponsor on this bill. And the idea is to be agnostic as to the sources of energy, but rather gain information that I believe, the committee can benefit from. So in this process, we have, Senator has worked with the Office of People's Counsel to draw amendments to the bill. Those amendments I've got here with me, I've not passed to the committee. But in short, if you adopt or accept the principle as to why I'm bringing the bill here, which is to be energy agnostic but informational to the benefit of the committee, these amendments that we would accept ensure that we address immediate concerns, ensuring a more robust and complete analysis, and ultimately lead to a more fruitful and productive discussion on state energy policy. So the Office of People's Counsel suggested amendments requiring the PSC to establish a baseline assessment of the costs to meet Maryland's energy demand over the next 15 years under the current resource mix, plus anticipated offshore wind capacity, taking into account costs to address foreseeable reliability concerns and foreseeable transmission capabilities. And then second, Office of People's Counsel's amendments have suggested changes to afford the Public Service Commission more flexibility to identify resource mixes. And so we are including PJM in this because the original bill doesn't really discuss that correctly. I'm just going to close by saying, like all of us, we want to bite at the apple to be helpful as we're talking with our constituents and our ratepayers about what we're doing as a state on energy policy. This bill is a practical study of those costs and benefits, and we look forward to your support on this piece of legislation.
Ben, are you just here for questions?
I'm just going to say that we are supportive with amendments, and that we will need a consultant to do the study, but we do find benefit in basically studying the cost of these and help as we continue to look for solutions to our energy needs. We do seek similar amendments to those discussed by OPC to make sure that it's technology neutral and that we have flexibility in the methodology as we work through this, and I'm happy to take questions.
Chair, I'm intrigued by it. Without seeing your amendments, I just wondering if you're considering like all the pieces that are possible to get like a low-cost system that works. So like how we could consider demand response, for example, which is a really key piece of our system now, but could be enhanced. And that's not technically adding generation, but there's the cost benefit of if we use demand response at some cost, but that's lower cost than building a new plant. Obviously, we've talked about grid enhancing technologies, reconductoring, all of those things potentially give us, more energy on the grid at some cost, but maybe at a lower cost than a new plant of whatever kind, right? And so I'm just curious about how you're envisioning thinking broadly about the lowest cost mix of everything, not just a plant.
My answer to the question is the bill's being brought with the lens of whatever you think or whatever the committee thinks would be helpful in getting good answers on energy prices. And I want to avoid the politics of the subject, and that's the nature of the bill. So if you and I can have productive conversations that don't lose the essence as to why I'm bringing the bill, which is to have simple, clear answers on each different form of energy generation and what those costs are so we can draw conclusions, whatever those conclusions might be, right? So we may choose a more expensive form of energy, but at least we know and understand. Those are the kind of questions like in subcommittee when we talk together. Oftentimes I'm left without that kind of information, and I believe it would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. I think that often when we sort of start with a definition of what's the cheapest generator, right, that kind of limits our ability to think about what's the lowest cost way to make sure we get electricity to everyone who needs it, right? Because that would include demand response and all the various things you might do on the grid to maximize its usage. So we can talk offline. I'd be interested in seeing whatever amendments you're starting with or PSC has, but that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I'm just trying to remember when we visited PJM, because I'm thinking about the different forms of energy and your demand response and those sort of things. I'm not sure I disagree with where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, thanks.
On its face.
Just briefly for PSC, MEA came out against this bill. They think they're doing more than enough and they're achieving all they need to achieve. I think this is a good bill. I think we need to do this based on what we're seeing out in the market. What's your opinion?
I think we are supportive of studying and having studies out there that are Maryland specific that discuss the cost of energy. I think the IRP division we're going to be discussing next week, largely this would fall within their responsibilities. And so I think this is the kind of things that will come up when you are studying all the various things that we have been talking about procurement around. So if this provides data points to help with the energy policy discussions, yes, but I do think to the delegate's point, we will need to define the scenarios, and in the report that comes out, make sure we lay out what we assume to get to these numbers, because a lot of this is projections. Projections give a range of outcomes, none right. And so I think it's going to be a question of what we put into the model, and that's why we're asking for flexibility on that, so when we engage with the consultants, that we would be able to appropriately do that and maybe give a various mixes of energy sources, as you say, in this scenario, this is the cost, in this scenario, this is the cost.
Delegate, do you have anything to say about that, or are you okay?
I'm happy to get your support on the bill.
Thank you very much.
Let the record reflect, though, the PSC loves studies. Delegate Weibel.
I know that prices and costs and expenses and all change all the time, but it seems like this would have been something that would have been done before the state kind of ventured down the road of all these different generation options. Has the PSC ever done such a study or no?
No, I'm not aware of us having done this back. So back in the day, we had an integrated resource planning division who would review basically when the utility said they needed to build new power plants, and that was before restructuring. And so after restructuring, we got rid of that group. Basically faded because we basically were relying on the markets to bring the generation in. So ultimately, no, we do not currently have the technical capabilities to do this, which is the reason for the fiscal note.
Yeah, so you guys think it'll cost us $500,000 to do this study?
It hopefully comes in lower than that, but we don't know what the consultants would ask for to do this study.
So you put it out to bid, you wouldn't do anything internally?
We would, some of our people would work with them, but the kind of software you need to do this kind of work, the people that I've worked with people that do this kind of modeling before, the number of them have PhDs. You're basically having to come up with what do you think the world is in the future, and they have these complex computer models where they basically have models of the grid that are making predictions about the future, and so you're paying for that expertise and access to their tools.
So you guys are the ones that developed the fiscal note, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Can I just add? Sure. That when I got the fiscal note the way we always do, sort of like later in the game, but I had talked with the PSC about the fiscal note because, as you might imagine, we have concerns with what we're spending money on. Let me just say, I don't know what it would fall to, and I don't know how we could maybe help with the fiscal note, but the policy that we're talking about and the challenges that are happening in the marketplace, I mean, I would just encourage the committee to consider any study that actually gets to some helpful policy discussions that we have in future years. Without the information that we would get like this, we do in some cases lead to policy decisions that I think would be better with that outcome being known with this information.
No, I agree.
That's all the thing I'll say. It's why I continue to bring the bill, these fiscal
I
notes.
agree, it's a good bill. I just was curious about the fiscal note and how it was derived. Thanks.
That's how they get out of studies they love. They attach those fiscal notes. All right, seeing no further questions, we have one favorable with amendment. It is Alex Pavlak. Go ahead and start when ready, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Pavlak. I'm a PhD engineer from Smyrna Park and the chairman of the Future of Energy Initiative. I like this bill. There are three aspects of it I like. First, it deals with whole systems. When I look at the cost of wind, the cost of building the wind turbine is not really the determining factor. It's the cost of the whole system with wind and without wind. And from that perspective, a little bit of wind is fairly cheap, but the whole system, a lot of wind on the system increases your complexity substantially. Second, there's a lot of spin out there in terms of modeling renewable resources. And Maryland needs the capacity to be able to determine the difference between good modeling and bad modeling. You need a center of excellence. An example here is NREL. NREL has a flagship model they call REEDS. And what they do is they base the predictions on average days. Wind never goes to zero in the NREL model. And when we compare results, they did a study for the Los Angeles, the LA 100 study, 100% clean for Los Angeles. And what we found is that it completely missed a 3-week period in December of 2017 where wind and solar resources were dismal, and it was that low production period that drove the whole size of the system. In my view, Maryland is, I come from the Pentagon. You talk about the PSC studies, Pentagon studies are 10 times more. When they make a decision to go from development to production, that's an enormous formal decision. And I think one of the reasons Maryland's having some difficulty here is it's being a little too casual about guessing at solutions rather than doing the homework and doing the analysis to really support the solution. The last comment is you really need a suite of models. One model doesn't do it. You start out with a simple spreadsheet, you keep it simple, and then with later generations of the model, you start introducing the things like...
Sir, I'm going to need you to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, that concludes this bill hearing. I don't see the next two bill sponsors, so we'll jump down to House Bill 1225, Delegate Chi.
Extra chair.
I'll text him.
Yeah, that's okay, but Robin is going to join us. Okay.
All right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Lalichi, here to present my first bill in front of ECM this session. HB 1225, the Affordable Grid Act. The bill is about distribution system planning. The committee has heard a good deal of discussions this session about transmission, which moves electricity from power plants to substations across long distances. This bill deals with power distribution, which is the part of grid that connects to our individual homes and businesses. The basic structure of the current distribution system has been around for almost a century. It was designed to move electricity in one direction, which is from big power plants to consumers. It was not designed to incorporate things that we now know and use these days, such as community solar or rooftop solar that also generates power, or to support extra load from things like electric vehicles and building electrification. With the growing complexity of power supply and the demand and the fast evolving technologies, it is imperative that we have a smart, modern distribution system that is responsive, efficient, and cost-effective, so utilities don't have to overbuild or underbuild their infrastructure. HB 1225 ensures comprehensive distribution system planning and empowers the Public Service Commission to oversee utilities' distribution planning efforts in some specific ways. First, it requires electric companies to submit a distribution system plan every 3 years to PSC for approval and provide the PSC with an annual progress report. The distribution system plan must include certain key elements, such as bottom-up demand forecasting that incorporates developments in vehicle and building electrification and the goals of state and the local decarbonization policies, and how these utilities plan to integrate new technologies into their planning, and how they will manage their distributed energy resources hosting capacity, and, for example, how they plan to leverage existing funds and incentives. Second, it also requires each gas company that operates within the territories that overlaps with these electric utility companies to participate also in the electric company's distribution planning process. And it also requires PSC to establish broad data exchange between electric and utility, gas utilities, because the assumption is these plannings should not take place in silos. Now, you may ask, why do we need this bill when there's already a working group on energy distribution system planning? And yes, that's correct. We already have a working group working on this front. And so the PSC 3 years ago in 2021 established a working group on electric system distribution planning. The working group submitted its draft report to PSC in January of this year, but the group only includes consensus items which the utilities must sign off on as recommendations to the PSC as draft regulations. So this bill essentially codifies the consensus items and takes a step further to include some other items that are equally important to our future grid and distribution system planning. For example, the key differences between HB 1225 and the draft regulations adopted by the work group is that the draft regulations do not require, for example, PSC's approval of these submitted distribution plans from utilities. Instead, they only require utilities to present their plans in an annual technical conference. We believe the approval is important. And second, for example, the coordination between gas and electricity planning, we believe is also essential. It is worth noting that other states are way ahead of Maryland in their requirements of what utilities must include in their distribution planning, very similar to what we are proposing here. So we are living at a time, as we all know, with rising energy costs that have alarmed our constituents and with unprecedented opportunities for cleaner energy. By encouraging cost-effective planning of the distribution system, utilities can prioritize innovative solutions over expensive infrastructure upgrades and equipment upgrades that drive up costs for our ratepayers. This is a time to act so we can work towards more comprehensive and coordinated distribution system planning. I want to point out that the chair of the Public Service Commission largely agrees in his testimony, as you can see his written testimony, with this bill's provisions and recognize the need for such legislative oversight. We look forward to working with PSC and its leadership on the proposed amendments. Thank you, and I'm now going to turn to my panel. Katie.
I'll start.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members. Again, I'm Dr. Alfred Bartlett. I live in Montgomery County, representing Physicians for Social Responsibility. As Delegate Xi said, HB 1225 is about the distribution part of the system. That's the poles, the wires, the transformers, the substations that actually connect our homes and businesses to the electricity grid. Since 2021, I've been a member of the PSC's Distribution System Planning Work Group. But before that, I was on the work group on community solar, which connects to the distribution grid. And I learned that limited capacity to connect projects to the grid was a major constraint. This limits people's ability to participate in this actually low-cost, clean, renewable energy source. The distribution system we have was really designed to take electricity one way, from big plants to customers, and it limits many of the things that we need to do to electrify and move off fossil fuels, like battery storage, EV charging, virtual power plants, or community solar. And it's not just about capacity. The modern grid we need is smart. It uses communication and control technologies, increasingly with AI, to balance the ever-changing input from large and small generation and batteries with the ever-changing demand. That's demand management. And it does it using the cleanest and lowest cost electricity. Smart distribution systems also increase reliability, reduce outages, and sometimes avoid the need for costly infrastructure. This lets us both electrify and decarbonize while saving money. One example is the the Green Mountain Power virtual power plant in Vermont. 2,500 customers participate using home-based batteries to store power when demand or prices are low and use it or sell it when they're high. With about 50 megawatts of VPP capacity, the program saves about $3 million a year. They're 78% on reliable sources, and they're 100% carbon-free on an annual basis. To move from the grid we have to the modern grid we needs good and modernized planning, and that's what HB 1225 does. We recommend a favorable recommendation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Katie Mettle, Policy Principal for Advanced Energy United, and I'm here to explain what HB 1225 will do. I do want to stress that I have created an outline of the bill in my written testimony that is more complete, and I can also share an 11-page document that goes into more detail contrasting this bill with the draft regulations. Here is a high-level summary of what the bill does, and of course, Delegate She did touch on a lot of this material. Every 3 years, an electric company must submit a distribution system plan, or DSP, for the PSC's approval, and the PSC has the authority to stagger when the electric companies submit their DSPs. The highlights of what the DSP must include are forecasts for both distributed energy resources and for load, a proposed portfolio of investments, each for at least 2 scenarios that minimizes capital infrastructure investments to the greatest extent possible, a list of chosen solutions for upgrading the grid and explanations for those decisions, a description of the electric company's plan to incorporate innovations in technology that will modernize the grid and improve its reliability and resilience, a description of how the electric company will coordinate on transmission and distribution in a manner that is most cost-effective to ratepayers, a description of how the electric company will use federal, state, and local resources and incentives to minimize costs to ratepayers, a description of the electric company's efforts to coordinate with gas companies to identify locations for decarbonization, to facilitate electrification, and to make sure demand by shared customers is not double counted, and analysis using metrics to be developed by the PSC. The DSP must then be made available for public comment and stakeholder vetting. The bill also lists the criteria for the PSC to determine whether to approve or reject a DSP. The electric company must complete the public stakeholder engagement process, and the DSP must advance our state's climate and greenhouse gas emissions goals and incorporate non-wire solutions and non-capital investments. The PSC may reject the plan if it doesn't minimize cost to ratepayers without compromising the grid's performance. Finally, an electric company must submit annual progress reports on fulfilling their approved DSP. I do want to highlight that there are 6 states that do require approval. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. OPC strongly supports House Bill 1225 because it will help ensure that Maryland's electric distribution system is modernized efficiently and affordably. While the Public Service Commission initiated a work group in 2021 to start discussing these issues and has issued a number of orders addressing them, critical gaps remain. The current DSP process lacks robust oversight and transparency. Utilities largely self-govern their distribution planning, deciding unilaterally if, when, and how investments are made. This approach does not provide the accountability needed to ensure that grid investments are both prudent and cost-effective. Indeed, if we could rely on the utilities to affordably modernize their grids in line with the CSNA on their own, we wouldn't need to pursue DSP reform at all. House Bill 2025 fills these gaps by requiring mandatory 3-year distribution plans be filed with the Commission subject to PSC approval. This would shift the DSP process from an internal utility-driven process to a regulated framework subject to stakeholder participation. The bill would also implement robust performance metrics to ensure grid reliability, clean energy integration, and cost control. The bill also establishes transparent stakeholder engagement processes, including public comment opportunities. The bill introduces a data-driven planning framework to improve forecasting and promote non-wire solutions as a lower-cost alternative. And finally, the bill mandates coordination between electric and gas utilities to align with state climate and equity goals. Without these reforms, utilities will continue to plan their distribution system investments on their own terms, risking unnecessary cost to ratepayers and missed opportunities for cleaner, cheaper energy solutions. HB 1225 is essential to ensure that Maryland's grid modernization efforts advance with accountability and affordability at its core. OPC respectfully requests a favorable report on House Bill 1225, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, good to see you again. Robin Dudd, I'm the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association, here presenting favorable testimony on HB 1225. Just to highlight a part of testimony to not repeat what's also been said is around process. You know, in order to get good answers, especially when there are complex problems, you want to make sure you can start with really good questions. That's how you can start to frame everything. That's how you can start to bring in all the necessary information and bring to consideration all the potential solutions and strategies that are out there. And then you can begin the evaluation process. When you have a more comprehensive docket like what Affordable Grid Act would create, it allows for the costs and the benefits more holistically to be considered. Regulatory dockets are always very narrow, and a lot of times, certainly, you know, as a stakeholder involved in those, it starts to bifurcate, you know, even my mind. Here's EVs, here's the RPS, here's grid mod, here's electric vehicles, and these are all cross-cutting, especially when it pertains to the size, architecture, cost of distribution grid plans, and what is then the most affordable, resilient, and reliable method of ensuring electricity for all ratepayers and all energy consumers. What this bill does is make that comprehensive process possible and bring a range of advanced energy technologies and the benefits that can come from them able to be considered all in one place. And for those reasons, we respectfully ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, Josh Tolkien on behalf of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club, urging a favorable report. Why am I speaking to this issue? Sierra Club has been an active participant in the Public Service Commission proceedings for at least the last 15 years, engaging on numerous proceedings from the Interconnection Working Group, Distribution Planning Group. We're often one of the few public participants that are not state agencies or energy providers. I'm not going to repeat any of the previous points, but I want to focus in on one key aspect of this bill. It requires that the Public Service Commission approve the utility plans. This is the model used when approving the multi-year rate cases, the Empower proceedings, as well as pilot projects. It's the way to ensure proper cost-benefit analysis. The public is getting what it needs. The plans that the distribution system plans will be included will be incredibly important. Do we have enough capacity to allow people to install electric vehicle charging systems on pace with our state goals to onboard clean renewable energy? Those plans have huge implications, not just on our clean energy and renewable energy goals, but also financially, as the state is making significant commitments. You will find in your written testimony that the utilities all say that the current system is working just fine within the work group. They are right. It is absolutely working just fine for the utilities. They currently have a majority stake in the work group. They have veto power within the context of requiring consensus decision-making. We think the participation and leadership of the utilities is essential. But at the end of the day, for something as important as how we meet our state goals, we believe that final Public Service Commission approval is critical if we want to see change at the pace we need. We understand we're in an energy crisis. We are approaching new generation with rigor. We urge you to approach distribution system planning with the same urgency and rigor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So unlike the last bill that just had a one-time $500,000 fiscal note, this one has about a $500,000 ongoing annual fiscal note. Have you seen, and you have any comments on that?
I believe that's the estimate based on what PSC thinks they would need to evaluate by establishing a set of criteria to evaluate these plans being proposed every 3 years.
Okay, and then, so the utilities and even the PSC kind of indicate that the requirements of this bill are duplicative of what's already been going on. Yeah, I know you touched on that a little bit, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of alluded to that, but I spoke to that a little bit earlier, which is, I mean, it's a good point that would be put forth by the utilities, that we already have a working group that has been actively working on the issues, but as several people on the panel indicated, the recommendations being put forth as draft regulations to PSC only include those consensus items out of over 100 members of the working group. That is quite utility-driven in terms of what's practical and what could be done, but we can be much more intentional and aggressive in pursuing our goals, not just in terms of cleaner energy, but new technologies, new incentives, and this bi-directional nature of our supply and demand system that is truly 21st century, rather than dragging our feet, because as we mentioned, many other states are ahead of us in terms of expecting their Public Service Commission to actually approve, rather than say, okay, we got your plan and do whatever you want.
And I would also add that this bill is intended to really build on what the work group has already started and just kind of bring it on home and finish the job. It's not meant to be duplicative.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, we have two information witnesses, John Borkowski and Ben Baker from the PSC. Hey, Ben, do you guys have actual testimony you want to read, or do you just want to get, okay, John does, sorry. Hold on one second. Yep, you're good. Go ahead, guys. You can start when ready.
Okay. Chair Wilson and committee members, my name is John Borkowski, and with me, you all know Ben Baker. We're both senior commission advisors, and we're here to provide informational testimony and answer questions. As is already mentioned, the commission launched the DSP work group in 2021, and the work group scope has expanded over time to include the requirements from legislative mandates, in addition to several commission orders providing direction to the work group. And there have been two previous pieces of legislation impacting the commission's DSP work, which are the CSNA in 2022 and the Electric System Planning Scope and Funding Act in 2024. And the commission is currently on track to implement DSP regulations by December 1st of this year, as required by statute. Now, House Bill 1225 substantially expands the requirements being contemplated in the current commission process. While the commission is aligned with the general intent of the bill, the commission offers several amendments to the extent the legislature believes that HB 1225 is necessary. Specifically, the commission seeks extensions or amendments to avoid the burden of fully litigated DSP cases, which make up the bulk of the commission's resource needs to implement the bill. The commission also seeks amendments that provide more flexibility for the commission to address the development of advanced planning capabilities in pursuit of the bill's objectives. Now, since HB 1225 as it currently exists modifies the intent and items to be covered by the current DSP workgroup efforts, the commission believes that the existing December 1st, 2025 statutory deadline for regulations needs to be extended by 12 months. And finally, ultimately the commission has led workgroup efforts. We've solicited written comments, we've held hearings, issued orders, and we feel like we'll have a DSP that creates better transparency in utility distribution planning and aligns with these previous legislative requirements. And by working with the sponsor to introduce the amendments we seek, we may be able to mitigate rework and associated delays in promulgating regulations. Thank you. We're here to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Seeing no questions, next we'll go to House Bill 1406, Delegate Baylor. Dylan, if you have a panel, you can bring them up.
Good.
Yeah, 1 second. So real quick, if you're signed, yep, okay, there's 3. I don't know what's going on behind you. Hey, can I get you guys to sit down? So if you are signed up, you can testify, but if you're not, you cannot. So I have Jeremy Green, Julia Fernandez, and Frederick Johnson. So Dylan, after you, those 3 individuals will be the 3 that testify. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the great Economic Matters Committee. I'm excited to have my first bill hearing as a delegate. And I also want to say a special thanks to Delegate Charkoudian. I got sworn in on the day, the bill filing deadline, so I did not get to request any bills, but she let me introduce this bill, so thank you. I am here to testify and request a favorable report on House Bill 1406, Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, Environmental Impact Analysis, and Existing Burden Report. For the record, I'm Dylan Baylor. I'm proud to represent District 30A, this district, here in the General Assembly. This bill would close what I'm kind of calling as a loophole in the CPCN process to ensure that there's effective recognition of our most overburdened and underserved communities when talking about and discussing and permitting energy generating projects. I think all of us have heard through our jobs the different stories that these types of projects can have on communities. I've heard plenty of stories about increased asthma rates, and we'll hear from health experts today, and soot-covered cars waking up in the morning. And I think this legislation is built to ensure that moving forward, the ongoing effects that these communities experience are incorporated into the CPCN process. So this bill is kind of broken up into 3 different parts, and there is a sponsor amendment that you'll see in your floor system. I think the first part of this is kind of with regard to the CPCN application. So firstly, this bill would require that, and I'm going to talk about it as amended, and you'll see the sponsor amendment. As amended, this bill would require that for CPCN projects within that are being proposed within 1.5 miles of a community that has a 75 or higher score on the Department of the Environment's Environmental Justice score, then in their application, there would have to be an initial environmental impact analysis that summarizes short-term and long-term environmental and public health impacts of the proposed project, and also an existing burden report that includes additional helpful information about the current impacts that community is experiencing. Then the bill, I think the second part of the bill is kind of during that and after the public comment period that the PSC does through their process. The bill would require a revision of those 2 things, the environmental impact analysis and the existing burden report, to incorporate comments that they receive from communities through that process. And then lastly, I think the third part of the bill is kind of focused on the actual CPCN application and permitting. It would require the Public Service Commission to make a determination as to if the project would lead to a increased potential for adverse environmental public health impacts for those communities within the 1.5 mile radius that have that 75 plus score on the EJ screening tool. And then if they do, if that determination is made, then it would still authorize the Public Service Commission to permit the project. However, it would require the Public Service Commission to require a cumulative impacts mitigation fund that would be brought together with community members and the project proposer to ensure that those cumulative impacts are being incorporated and addressed. And in your packet, you do have a sponsor amendment. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to point out after working with the advocates, the sponsor amendment really ensures that this is just about energy generating projects, not any other part of the CPCN process, and that it is exempting solar, wind, and geothermal from this. We're really trying to target and tailor this legislation. So with that, I would respectfully request a favorable report of House Bill 1406 and pass it along to my panel.
Hey, Dylan, real quick, is this your first bill?
It is, yeah.
All right, congrats.
Thank you.
Second, Delegate Charkoudian is clearly luring you in early. Yeah. Be careful. And third, I don't know if they're messing with you or messing with me, but there's a whole lot. My book only has 3 people. There are a lot more people signed up. So
who are the three that?
No, don't worry about it. There's more than just what I got. So just state your name, and if you're signed up on one of these pages, we'll let you testify. All right. So go ahead.
Would you like to?
Me?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Sorry. My name is Julia Fernandez, and I'm a CASA member. CASA is Maryland's largest immigrant advocacy and service organization. I am originally from Honduras and a proud Garifuna. After living in New York, I moved to East Baltimore 9 years ago. I'm here today because my community should not be considered when trying to certify a new fossil fuel power plant. The air quality in my neighborhood is so bad, it makes us sick. The water we drink feels just as bad. Next to where I live, there is a concrete plant, a garbage dump, petroleum tanks, and huge trucks open down in my community. There's a power plant that burns oil and electricity. I support this bill because I will make sure that polluted communities like mine are protected from pollution. I care about my own health, my kids' and grandkids' health. Caring about the environment is something natural to me. I even noticed that at Lake Montebello and Clifton Park, there's no more wildlife. They go on. The problem of air quality for low-income families in Baltimore is so bad that on the Section 8 housing website, it tells you how bad the air quality at different low-income housing units. A polluted community like mine was no accident. So we need to make active decisions, protect them. I ask in behalf of my community to support this bill. Thank you very much.
Sure. So for the record, I'm Jeremy Green. I'm a practicing physician in the East Baltimore Medical Center and a professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins. My views are my own. As a practicing doctor, I want to frame HB 1406 as a form of preventive medicine, using asthma as an example. Any doctor who sees patients with asthma knows that diagnosis and prescription are the easy part. If this is where we stop, we fail to address the lives of millions of people whose asthma is triggered by cumulative burden of antigens in the built environment and particulate matter suspended in the air where they live and work. Because asthma is an environmental disease, most asthma deaths are preventable. We know from decades of data that healthcare workers who think upstream can help patients reduce triggers in their homes and work with medical legal aid groups to find safer housing. These measures have proven to save lives, but only if we think to use them. So HB 1406 addresses a fundamental upstream cause of morbidity and mortality in asthma and other pulmonary diseases, a disproportionate cumulative burden caused by concentrating environmental triggers in certain communities. As a doctor in Baltimore, I first became interested in the problems posed by energy plants, among other heavy industries, when I learned that the disposable syringes, gloves, masks, and gowns used in my clinic were all going to a waste-to-energy incinerator in South Baltimore, owned by Curtis Bay Energy Company. And I'm sure the members of this committee already know Curtis Bay Energy was later found guilty of the largest environmental crime settlement in the history of the state of Maryland, after MDA found subpar incineration was exposing residents to unacceptable levels of partially combusted medical plastics. But the story of Curtis Bay Energy is not the story of a single bad actor. It's a story of an energy installation whose community health effects need to be understood as cumulative within the 40-plus other heavy industries co-located nearby, which present a very different burden to the lungs of South Baltimore residents than that which my lungs face in my North Baltimore neighborhood just 10 miles away. So asthma is not just an urban disease, it's disproportionately dangerous in rural areas and counties like Prince George's County, Garrett County, Dorchester County, and many others. The common denominator here is disproportionate burden of downstream health effects. So I learned of the importance of Cherish and HB 1406 through the advocacy of the South Baltimore Community Land Trust. I want to understand SBCLT's efforts need to extend well beyond Baltimore City to work in concert with other affected communities across the state. So this is problems that can be addressed, that cannot be addressed at a local level alone. They require a prescription only the state of Maryland can provide.
All right, who's next? Go ahead.
Would you like to go?
I think I need a mic.
Yeah, I'll see.
Go ahead, sir. You got the mic.
I could go.
Yeah, perfect, and you're loud.
Excellent. Let's make it happen. Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. I'm Frederick Johnson, policy analyst for the Center of Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health, Empowering Communities, SIEGE Inc. for short, to express our strong support of HB 1406, which will provide important targeted environmental health protections for the communities of Maryland most overburdened by pollution. A study found that regional air pollution from oil and gas production in the U.S. is responsible for 7,500 excess deaths, 410,000 asthma attacks, and 2,200 new cases of asthma each year. These health effects due to oil and gas production creates annual health costs of $77 billion. Nitrogen oxide, a common pollutant associated with burning natural gas, was the largest contributor to mortality and over 80% of asthma attacks. These health impacts were previously unaccounted for in permitting decisions. HB 1406 introduces a process to consider environmental justice and cumulative impact in permitting, which will alleviate future burden in these communities. Baltimore is a case of energy justice due to the number of incinerators, power plants, and heavily trafficked roadways. They have contributed to increased air pollution, which has been correlated with the urban heat island effect and overall excessive heat between 2012 and 2018. 28% of Maryland's heat-related deaths occurred in Baltimore, whose population is predominantly Black, demonstrating the differential burden of energy injustice on communities of color in the state of Maryland. With recent attacks on environmental justice at the federal level, it is now more important than ever for states like Maryland to take ownership of environmental protection and serve as a model for other states that similarly experience differential impact. As Maryland confronts an energy crisis, we can and must make sure we do not increase pollution on already overburdened communities. HB 1406 is a necessary and timely bill to protect the most polluted communities in Maryland from more pollution. We urge a favorable report. Thank you for your time. My name is John Garofalo. I'm an Anne Arundel watershed steward, an environmental advocate for my community, and a retired federal AI and machine learning scientist. I've lived in the community of Stony Beach in North Anne Arundel County for 20 years. We are subject to a great deal of polluters in the tidal Patapsco area, but closest to my community is the Brandon Shores and Wagner coal and fossil fuel power plants. Both are less than 1,000 feet from our homes. These plants emit soot, particulates, toxic and carcinogenic chemicals. I've heard stories of unusual cancer, heart, respiratory, and neurological disease from my neighbors, and I myself have had cancer. I also have asthma and AFib, which often flare up on days when the air is still and when the smoke from these plants is blowing towards my home. Sometimes I can hardly breathe. I'm deeply concerned about how the increasing demand for electricity in the region might cause the plants next to my home to remain open indefinitely, and that new power generation polluters might even be added. We're only looking at part of the economic picture if we just consider the cost of electricity. The health effects of energy generation polluters have largely uncaptured impacts on our state's economy, from significant health costs for citizens, insurers, and the state, to sick days and unemployment that impact businesses, to strain on our medical system, and to depressed home values. Our pollution overburdened communities are now even graded on common real estate apps. Maryland can be a leader in showing the way for easing these burdens through a quantitative approach. We have the data and technology to make this possible, including the ability to create a more comprehensive assessment of costs that incorporate cumulative pollution burdens across communities and stakeholders.
This bill and others in legislation that take a quantitative approach to correcting environmental injustice are an important step towards supporting healthy, thriving communities and reducing the hidden costs of pollution. We ask you to please support HB 1406. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have a legit question? Okay. All right. Delegate, good job. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pretty courageous to come into ECM on the first one.
My first bill in ECM, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, move on favorable. No. I'll call the next few names: Joanne Frederick, Rebecca Rare, Emily Ransom, and Andrea Orozco. And you can start when ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. My name is Joanne Frederick. I'm with Stop NPRP, Inc. I will be very brief in the interest of time. Anything we can do to add additional scrutiny to the CPCN process to better understand the impact of our community on our communities is, in my opinion, a good thing. I urge a favorable report.
Emily's sick, so she's not here. Just FYI. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Rebecca Rear, Director of Climate Policy and Justice for Maryland LCV. HB 1406 is the companion bill to HB 1484, the Cherish Our Communities Act, which is a Maryland LCV priority and an environmental community priority. The Cherish Act addresses permits and MDE's authority, while the bill in front of you today, HB 1406, addresses permits for energy generating facilities issued by the PSC. The process in the bills are the same, to include cumulative impacts assessment in our regulatory agencies' permitting decisions. This is an important upstream solution to preventing the concentration of facilities in a way that ends up harming people living near them. The first cumulative impacts bill was introduced in Maryland in 2014. Since that time, Maryland has made some progress, including the development of the state's EJ mapping tool and requiring that some environmental justice information be included in certain types of permit applications. But we have fallen behind other states, including New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and Minnesota, in implementing comprehensive and meaningful cumulative impacts laws. HB 1406 represents a community-driven effort to address gaps in our state permitting processes that would give our regulatory agencies more authority and ability to protect community health. Thank you, and we urge a favorable report on HB 1406 with the sponsors' clarifying amendments.
Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee, my name is Andrea Orozco and I work as the advocacy lead at Interfaith Power and Light DMV, and I'm here to request a favorable report on HB 1406. Interfaith Power and Light DMV is a grassroots organization working with over 1,200 congregations across the state and thousands more individuals. We work to support these communities and people of faith as they live in their values to care for our common home and our most vulnerable neighbors. We believe that we all deserve to live and worship in healthy communities, and HB 1406 would ensure that we have the tools necessary to protect our most impacted communities from new polluting facilities. Our processes should be working for and with people. By allowing the PSC to reject or alter CPCN applications based on an analysis triggered by a community's environmental justice score, Maryland can preserve the dignity and health of our communities while meeting our energy demands. Our work with congregations has made one thing clear. Faith leaders across the state are increasingly concerned for the health and access to clean air of their congregants and the communities they serve. The 2nd District of the AME Church has recently created an environmental justice ministry across their network aimed at caring for and restoring our common home. This includes over 120 congregations in Maryland alone. In particular, Reed Temple AME in Prince George's County has implemented not only their EJ ministry, but has become a beacon in our state for a more sustainable and green way of living. These churches care about protecting their members' health, and they should have a voice in the decisions to impose polluting facilities in their communities. This bill would give us the opportunity to prevent further harm and ensure that we are working to redress the way these facilities are making our neighbors sick. We support the sponsor amendments being introduced here and urge a favorable report on HB 1406. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, that concludes this bill hearing. Next, we will go to Delegate Valderrama, House Bill 1338. Delegate, you can bring up your panel and start when ready.
This is me. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, esteemed members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, Chris Valderrama here to present House Bill 1338. What this bill attempts to provide is a more balanced approach to the siting of battery energy storage systems, the BEST projects, by requiring a CPCN for nearly all energy storage devices, just as a way to provide a more inclusive process for integrating the community input into the placement of this emergent technology. So as it stands now, utilities have carte blanche authority to site smaller battery projects as they see fit without any community input, so to speak. There are no guidelines. Our major utilities, which have not always been aware or responsive to community needs, in my personal experience, are left to self-police in this important area. So this actually happened in my district just last year. So PEPCO opted to place a battery storage unit on property they already owned. So notwithstanding, I do understand the cost savings to PEPCO. They already owned the land and wanted to use it, but however, the location that they were looking at off Livingston Road was highly unsuitable for the siting of a battery storage unit. It was near an established neighborhood, near two public schools, one of which is my alma mater, Oxon Hill High School, and within feet of a well-attended daycare facility. So in other jurisdictions, usually these battery units are stored in industrial areas, usually, which are more suitable for this kind of use. So the constituents in the district fought for 3 years before PEPCO voluntarily pulled their project based on difficulties that they were having with their vendor, which I should add that their vendor was not effectively vetted, and they realized that somewhere down the process. So had there been any kind of community input, this project might not ever have gone forward. And the community where the BEST project was located was miles away from the site that they were trying to help assist that would benefit from this project, which would be National Harbor. So we see this happen sometimes, and our constituents tend to get silenced out from providing their community input, outmaneuvered and ignored by larger corporate interests. I do want to add, though, when I mentioned that project, I will add that PEPCO at the time was under a different, for lack of a better word, administration, leadership, what have you. So I just want to point out that the incoming PEPCO folks that we were dealing with, we really appreciate the assistance they provided that was able to have this project removed from our district. So many communities have concerns about this type of technology, and farming communities are concerned that prime farmland will be compromised, while urban and suburban communities, like the district that I represent, are largely concerned with protection from fire and contaminants. And with their ability to protect schools, daycare, hospitals, and residential communities from this emerging and sometimes unsafe and unhealthy technology. So I think we can all attest, all of us are concerned about the lack of best safety practices and training for those who will address the possible catastrophic results, including our firefighters, God forbid, should something go wrong. So I want to make clear that I support Maryland's efforts to reduce our carbon footprint, as I'm sure all of us here on this committee does as well. So I enthusiastically voted for the bills to limit our energy use. The constituents, though, my constituents, support Maryland's energy goals. So we need to address this important issue with all deliberate speed before some of the well-documented disasters that have occurred elsewhere, particularly out west, occur here in Maryland, or don't occur here in Maryland. So I believe that the established procedures of the CPCN, Certificate of Public Convenience, along the available expertise on the state level is our best option to address these safety issues. And with that, I would urge a favorable report of House Bill 1338.
Thanks, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the Economic Matters Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on House Bill 1338, Public Utilities Certificates of Public Convenience and Necessity for Energy Storage Devices. Again, I'm Leah Meredith, the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director of the Solar Energy Industries Association, or SEIA. SEIA is still the National Trade Association for the solar and storage industries, building a comprehensive vision for the advancement of these technologies. We work with our 1,200 member companies, which include solar solar and storage manufacturers, service providers, residential, community, and utility scale solar developers, installers, construction firms, investment firms, and other strategic partners to shape fair market rules that promote competition and the growth of reliable energy storage and low-cost solar power. Energy storage is critical to an efficient electric grid that will enable Marylanders to produce clean energy when it's abundant, store it, and send it back to the electricity grid when it's needed. When the grid is down, energy storage can provide critical backup power to emergency shelters, homes, hospitals, businesses, even neighborhoods. In many cases, energy storage assets can be deployed in lieu of traditional costly and slow investments to grid infrastructure. Utilities can also use storage to increase capacity of new energy deployment. HB 1338 would require storage assets to receive a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, CPCN, from the Public Service Commission before beginning construction of any system with a capacity of 2 megawatts or larger. This is already the law of the land for new sources of electricity generation, and Maryland's CPCN process is well equipped to handle these types of complex permitting reviews. By allowing energy storage system to undergo the same administrative application and approval process as new sources of generation, HB 1338 takes an important step forward in ensuring storage assets can be deployed in a safe, routine, and consistent manner in Maryland and begin contributing to the reliability and resiliency of the state's electric grid. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 1338. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, that concludes this bill hearing. Next, we'll go to Delegate Miller, and I have Joanne Frederick on your panel.
Yes.
You can start when ready.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby and my esteemed colleagues on economic matters. I am Delegate April Miller, and I am here to ask for your favorable report on House Bill 1219. In an era where digital infrastructure powers nearly every aspect of our lives, the efficiency, sustainability, and impact of data centers has become a crucial topic. Today, I want to discuss a forward-thinking strategy, co-locating large data centers with power-generating stations that are not connected to the traditional electric grid. This approach presents a range of compelling advantages, from cost savings to enhanced reliability and environmental benefits. The rapid increase in Northern Virginia data centers has caused an unprecedented and exponential increase of energy load demands on the grid. PJM established the need for the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project, the MPRP, which is a vast 500 kilovolt transmission corridor slicing from the coal-burning energy producers in Pennsylvania through Baltimore, Carroll, and Frederick counties to thread the power into Loudoun County, Virginia. This project would destroy acres of Maryland forests and protected farmland, as well as a over 150-year bucolic viewshed. It threatens our crops, protected habitats, as well as our streams that support the Bay ecosystem. It severely impacts family homes, our agritourism, farms, and businesses, many of which will not recover. Maryland is on pace to become an 80% net importer of energy. Building more data centers will accelerate that. We need to look to a future that does not result in Maryland becoming a patchwork of power lines, and that is the focus of this legislation. So here are some issues to consider. The energy and cost saving and sustainability. Traditional data centers rely on the public power grid, where energy costs fluctuate based on demand, supply constraints, and geopolitical factors. By co-locating a data center with its dedicated power source, companies can secure stable long-term energy pricing. This model eliminates the exposure to peak pricing surges and transmission fees, making operations more predictable and cost-effective. And it also protects consumers from bearing the brunt of the increased costs and higher rates. And enhance energy efficiency. When a data center draws power directly from a generating station, it eliminates energy losses with long-distance transmission. Conventional grid-connected electricity undergoes a transmission loss of 5 to 10% before reaching its destination. By co-locating with a power plant, this waste is significantly reduced, making the entire operation more energy efficient. Increased reliability and uptime. Downtime is the ultimate enemy of data centers. With an independent power source, data centers are insulated from external grid failures, blackouts, and brownouts. This results in a more resilient infrastructure that can guarantee continuous uptime, an essential factor for mission-critical applications such as cloud computing, financial transactions, and AI-driven operations. This also lessens the likelihood of grid failures and blackouts for the surrounding consumers. Customization of power needs. Unlike grid-dependent centers, a co-located facility can tailor its power generation to its specific requirements, and whether using natural gas, hydro, nuclear, or renewable sources like wind and solar, the power plant can be optimized for data center loads, ensuring the most efficient and cost-effective operation. And many companies today are striving to reduce their carbon footprint, and co-locating a data center with a renewable or low-carbon power source can significantly contribute to this goal. For example, using an on-site hydroelectric or small nuclear minimizes dependence on fossil fuels and aligns with sustainability initiatives and improves public perception. A dedicated energy source also allows data centers to scale more efficiently, and instead of competing for the grid capacity or waiting for public utilities to upgrade the infrastructure, a co-located facility can expand power generation in tandem with the data processing needs. This flexibility makes it an ideal choice for high-growth industries like AI, big data, and blockchain technology. Operating independently from the public grid can simplify regulatory compliance. Many utilities, of course, impose strict rules on large-scale electricity consumers, sometimes requiring demand curtailment during peak hours. So by generating its own power, a data center avoids most of these constraints and gains greater autonomy. And then there is the potential for waste heat utilization. Data centers generate a significant amount of heat, which is often wasted, so co-locating with a power plant presents opportunities for symbiotic energy use. Waste heat from the data center could be repurposed for district heating or even assist with the power generation process, furthering enhancing efficiencies. Planning for the future has to start now. Microsoft bought 3 Mile Island to power their data centers. Google is partnering with Kairos to rapidly develop SMRs. Amazon is working with Dominion to plan for an SMR in Virginia. So co-locating a large data center with an off-grid power station is a strategic move that offers immense benefits: cost savings, reliability, efficiency, sustainability, and scalability. And as our world will continue to demand more computing power, innovative energy solutions will be key to ensuring that data centers will remain economically viable, environmentally responsible, and that our citizens aren't going to pay the price.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. My name is Joanne Frederick. I am the president of Stop NPRP, and I am here in strong support of House Bill 1219 because it provides a clear path forward on how to power data centers should Maryland decide we ultimately want them. I recognize there is other legislation pending to study the impact of data centers in Maryland. That's an important conversation, but HB 1219 ensures that if we move forward with those data centers, we do so responsibly and sustainably. We know that data centers consume massive amounts of power. A single facility can use as much electricity as 100,000 homes. Without a smart energy plan, Maryland risks relying on imported power from Pennsylvania and beyond, which would mean new transmission lines cutting through our farms, forests, and harming the Chesapeake Bay watershed. HB 1219 also aligns with the president's stated goal of co-locating power with energy-intensive industry. It puts Maryland in a leadership position by setting clear, forward-thinking policy, one that requires data centers to generate their own power on site rather than overloading our electric grid or destroying our rural communities. This is our opportunity to get ahead of the curve, protect Maryland's environment, and ensure that energy-intensive industries are part of the solution, not the problem. With that, I urge the committee to issue a favorable report on HB 1219.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Delegate, welcome to ECM. It's your first bill here, right?
This year. No, I've had a...
This year?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
This year.
So there's a couple letters from some of the energy providers, PEPCO, BG&E, and I don't know why they would be opposed, because if you have a co-location, if you're creating, if a data center is creating their own energy, they're not connected to the grid, why would they care?
Correct.
So,
because they don't get the revenue from powering them.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sure.
Delegate, just to confirm, does this allow Calvert Cliffs to co-locate?
No.
So it's only prospective. And so have you read the leadership bills?
Not all of them, no. I've got a lot of leadership bills in my education
well,
part. I'm
the energy
sorry, I
bills,
apologize.
And you should take a look at the chair's bill because we're going to
Okay.
do something similar going
Will
forward.
do, that would be great.
Delegate Weibel.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, thanks for bringing the bill. Just to clarify, so the data center can be connected to the grid, but its generating facility cannot, or neither can be connected to the grid under this bill?
The intention was neither.
Neither, okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we have one favorable with amendment. That is Alex Pavlak. Go ahead and start when ready, sir. Thanks, Delegate. You're good.
Oh, thank you,
Yep.
Chair. Thank you for the advice.
Yep. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Good afternoon. I was impressed with this bill that somebody who knows where data centers are going is behind it. I need to chat with the delegates more. The plug it into the grid model works well when the load is small. When the load gets big, taking it off the grid benefits everybody. And this is the future of big data centers. A concern that I would expect environmentalists would have would be, well, what happens if you use natural gas plants to power the data center? The way to handle that, and that's my amendment, is to stage construction, where it takes 3 years to build a data center, 3 years to build a fossil fuel plant, 8 years to build a nuclear plant. So if the intention is to power it with nuclear, the way to do it is to start it up with natural gas, and the natural gas plant becomes a backup for the nuclear power plant. But big off-the-grid data centers is the way the industry is going to eventually evolve, in my opinion, and this is an opportunity for Maryland to establish a leadership position in data centers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, that concludes this bill hearing. Next, we will go to Delegate Buckle. All rise. House Bill 1217.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah. And we'll have Alex. Alex, you can come back up. I got you. Never mind. Sorry. You're favorable with amendments. Go ahead, Delegate. Alone and unafraid.
Thank you. I know it's been a long day. I won't belabor two bills in a row and try to do them pretty succinctly. These are actually bills developed by Senator Chris West that I have cross-filed, so I take no pride of ownership in them. They are simply, the first one is HB 1217, which deals with permitting or authorizing natural gas generating facilities. I'm sure all of you spend a tremendous amount of time in this committee dealing with these issues, and I won't gloss that over too much, other than I think that we all understand, all of us, I think, understand that in the midterm, whether that's the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, natural gas generating facilities are going to have to be a part of the electricity and energy supply metric for our state, just as they are for the vast majority of states in our United States. What this bill would do is it would essentially say that at least until we have 50% or more renewable sources, which would include nuclear, I think that's building upon things that Democratic leadership here in the House and Senate have begun to discuss, including nuclear in our renewable energy portfolio, and also opening the door more for potential natural gas that is clean, that is environmentally sound and friendly to the greatest extent possible. And that's really all the bill does, is say, hey, regardless of what other provisions of law that would be out there that would limit natural gas generating facilities coming, I know MEA has said, well, there's no law that says they can't come. Truth is, when was the last time there was a natural gas generating power plant built in Maryland? Not very recently. And there's nothing on the horizon, because the perception is that the regulatory environment would make it very, very difficult to do. So this is just one part of a portfolio of bills, I'm sure, this year that could help to alleviate some of that concerns and maybe get us producing more of our power, not being a net energy importer, so that our energy needs, whether it be data centers or electrification or whatever it is, gets addressed concretely. And that's really all it does.
How does
the
this
portable
bill
chemical
impact
toilet guy.
portable chemical toilets, Delegate?
I don't know the answer to that one.
On a serious note, we had a bill earlier today that would include nuclear into the clean energy mix. So if that were the case, I think your requirements We'd already be at the 50% mark?
You know, it's if you read the fiscal note, there's some distinction as to what that means. So 50% of what would, if you included Calvert Cliffs, essentially, you could say that 50% of the power that we generate in state, but because we're a net importer of roughly 40%, I think, as you all know, we're anticipated to go up even higher than that over the next few years. The math that was done by people smarter than me, I went to law school to avoid math, they believe that that really calculates about 28, 29% of the electricity that we use would actually come from nuclear and another mix of green or renewable sources.
Okay, thank you. I suspect it could be up and down. At some point, we may be above the 50.
It could, and you'll see, I think, some of the folks from some of the unions that are very, very interested in building and servicing new power plants here because they are great jobs and great construction projects. Some of them in the comments have even suggested that maybe we go as high as 80%. I leave those kind of things to the committee itself to decide where that mix sort of hits the right spot.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. For the record again, Alex Pavlak, PhD engineer from Severna Park and the chairman of the Future of Energy Initiative. Electric prices are rising in Maryland. We're seeing a rise now, a big rise this summer. In a op-ed in the Baltimore Sun, I asked the question, what happens after this summer? Are they going to continue to rise, or are we going to have a rolling blackouts because of a shortage of firm capacity? This bill, as I understood it, was to provide a rapid base of firm capacity using natural gas. If you increase the firm capacity within the state, you should reduce your electricity rates, terminate the RMR with Brandon Shores, and be in a much better position than you are right now. The challenge is, or the objection I have with the bill is that it assumes the barrier to natural gas in Maryland is regulatory, and that I disagree with. The barrier to natural gas in Maryland is financial. Maryland has a RGGI tax where you're taking out like $274 million in fiscal 24 out of the natural gas industry, and that's the reason why the natural gas industry is leaving the state. It's a very effective way to close fossil fuel plants. My suggested amendment to this bill is an exemption on the RGGI tax, for a temporary exemption on the RGGI tax to incentivize production. That without that incentive, I don't think you're going to get any new natural gas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Delegate Buckle, you can remain. Alex, you can step back. Ms. Frederick, you can come on up. And now we'll go to House Bill 1218.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 1218, again, as I mentioned, is a bill cross-filed with Senator Chris West. It really has two components. The first would be to initiate a task force to develop a realistic electricity plan for Maryland. There's a famous line in a well-known movie from many years ago that says, crab cakes and football, that's what Maryland does best. I think the reality is, you know, bureaucracy and the administrative state might be what Maryland does best. We have a tremendous amount of bureaucratic organizations and a variety of regulators that exist in the energy sector, as this committee likely knows better than anyone. However, at the end of the day, I don't think we can say clearly and honestly that we have a coherent, realistic plan to provide for our energy and electricity needs for the coming years. We have a lot of ideas, we have a lot of different regulators, we have a lot of different goals, but no one can sit there and say, hey, we've all sat down and this is exactly how we're going to be able to do it in the real world. The task force would be an attempt to try to do that. I think Senator West likes task forces. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I think that it's necessary to bring all of the parties together from all of the various angles in a very formal way and come up and say, here's our plan and here's what we're going to do for the foreseeable future to work that plan in a real way, as opposed to just sometimes targets and goals that cannot be met, or a variety of different regulators at cross purposes with themselves and with the affected stakeholders. Second part of the bill basically says that, and I think a lot of this is because the things you've heard all day today, probably all day yesterday, probably all session, the issues that arise from needing to import so much of our electricity, creating transmission lines that are running all across the state and sometimes really have negative effects for landowners, for environmental sensitivities, and for property values. What the bill would do is that until the task force is up, running, and makes recommendations about how to do this, it would have a temporary pause, less than a year pause, for the Public Service Commission to issue certificates of public convenience and necessity for new transmission line projects. It would not affect transmission line projects that have already received a certificate or that are already under development. It would just simply say, let's take, I think, a 10-month pause while we look at these things and while we determine how we can do them, rather than have kind of a patchwork quilt of one project after another. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby. Is there a star for closing out 2 days in a row?
Oh, yeah, you are going to close out, but not here.
So good afternoon, Joanne Frederick, Stop NPRP. Maryland stands at a crossroads in its energy future. PJM interconnection has proven unreliable, failing to provide transparency in their data and decision-making process. Meanwhile, the rapid expansion of speculative data center development is driving unpredictable demand, while federal clean energy policies are shifting under the current administration. And yet we are being asked to accept irreversible infrastructure decisions in a time of unprecedented uncertainty. The energy ecosystem is evolving too fast to rely on outdated, brute force transmission expansion. Consider these realities. PJM's forecasting failures have led to rate increases and unnecessary builds. Data center boom is speculative. New AI-driven models like DeepSeek and other rapid advancements are making massive centralized data centers obsolete before they're even built. Federal and state clean energy initiatives are in flux with no clear trajectory under shifting political landscapes. Grid technology is advancing. Distributed energy solutions, AI-optimized demand management, and grid edge innovations offer smarter, localized alternatives to massive transmission lines. Yet, despite this uncertainty, we are being told to accept the permanent destruction of Maryland's forests, farmlands, and communities for transmission projects that only benefit publicly traded utility and tech companies. HB 1219 is a common sense, data-driven safeguard that gives us time to assess Maryland's real energy needs before locking ourselves into outdated solutions. I urge this committee to issue a favorable report on HB 1218. Pick a number.
Close.
I just wanted to ask Delegate Buckle if he realizes he's on the record saying that Maryland doesn't
best. It's recorded, so I'm going to use that as
I'm a fan of the University of Maryland, and when it comes to professional football, my allegiances lie a little bit to the north and the west, a little bit.
We were just shocked. He quoted an old movie that was in color. Delegate Pepe.
Listen.
Too funny. So back to business. So 1218, I actually think it's really important because new administration, you know, these offshore projects, potential issues with credits, tax credits related to solar projects. I mean, if these things are unworkable, then we do have to go back to the drawing board to provide reliable and affordable energy for our constituents. And we see it in this committee quite a bit. Sometimes it's like the same script, but yet we're in a different place now. New administration, we got energy needs here. And I think we should go back to the drawing board and see how we get back to the basics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think any business wants cost certainty. They want regulatory clarity. Energy is one of the most important businesses that exists because everything we're doing is reliant upon it. If we didn't have proper energy, we wouldn't be sitting here, we wouldn't be using our cell phones, we wouldn't be doing anything. And so it's if not the most important, it's certainly one of the 2 or 3 most important industries that exist. And they want certainty and clarity. And if the ability, whether it's this vehicle or any other vehicle, if we could all come together from each perspective that exists on this issue and come up with a real plan that's workable, that lasts 10 or 15 years, and then stick to it and adopt and adapt as necessary, we'd be better off than sort of bouncing back and forth with a variety of different rules every year.
All right, Delegate, I don't know if you take 97 on the way home. But my father-in-law's on it. It's closed both ways. So
closed both ways.
Yes, car's on fire, and I don't know.
That doesn't sound good. I think I'll just be staying here for a while.
All right. Well, that concludes this bill hearing. We will now go to the final bill of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. House Bill 1224. Ms. Frederick, you can stay up there. You'll get the last word. Again.
Again. This is great.
Go ahead,
What are you doing
Delegate.
next week?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee. And I will be brief. I know our day has been long, our week has been long, and I'm very dismayed by the traffic report that we just heard. The purpose of this bill is in reaction to what we've heard the last 2 days, MPRP. I appreciate Mrs. Frederick coming out to continue to support all of these various bills. This one actually focuses on the linear projects, which deals with our forest land, and it would seek to ensure that if a utility clear cuts trees, it would be required to replant the trees. Now, and as of October 1st, 2025, which I would hope would put a stoplight to some of the MPRP, the PSDG project. The bill seeks to ensure the replanting. It would be problematic to plant trees underneath these transmission lines due to the maintenance of the tree growth, and rather than clear that many acres of trees, removing this exemption, our hope would be that the planned path would be reconsidered so that our forest conservation areas would be preserved. As you've heard several times, this project threatens forests, farmland, private property in our rural areas, and I'll just keep it brief. I did get expert legal opinion from one of the opposing letters from the Forest Conservation from Delegate Pippi, and I actually talked to Delegate Charkoudian about it, so we have bipartisan support that I don't think they really understood the bill, and I'll leave it at that, and I ask for a favorable report.
Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee, Joanne Frederick, STOP MPRP. I ask for a favorable report on 1224. As we've stated many times and probably will again, MPRP alone will destroy 400 acres of forest. And this bill helps to protect what we have worked so hard to protect across Maryland. It is a simple bill, but I think it's crucial to give us another tool in the toolkit to make sure that we're not destroying Maryland for the sake of transmission and data centers. With that, again, urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, that concludes the bill hearings for today. I want to thank all the members and have a good weekend.
Now we have to get on 97?
It's got to be.
Ugh.
Members of the minority party, 30 seconds. No, I think you're all instructed.